Hi, I'm Game Chill Meow.
And I'm Stipple.
And this is Game Talk Meow podcast. Today we are talking about Doki Literature Club Plus. Be aware this is gonna be a spoiler cast, so spoilers galore. If you haven't played the game, do yourself a favor and go and play it. Spoilers, it is amazing. It is well worth playing on your own instead of listening to two random people talking about it and spoiling everything for you. So there you go. Or, alternatively, you can watch my playthrough on YouTube. There. Nice plug. But without any further ado, let's get into the talking about the game. So I feel always it is a good idea before we dive into the actual topic to kind of let our viewers know what is our experience, what is our background, where are we coming from in terms of, similar games or games in a maybe similar genre. So there are two genres we're talking about here, and this would not be any spoilers just yet, but one, of course, would be visual novels, because Doki Literature Club is definitely a visual novel, and the second one would be horror games, because that is how the game is advertised. So, let me ask you, Stipple, what is your background with visual novels? What other visual novels have you played?
Yeah, good question. So I haven't played that many, to be honest. I'm not a huge visual novel player. I played a few different ones, but I've only really finished two games prior to Doki that some people might find familiar. So one of them is Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward, which is kind of like a thriller / horror type game experience as well. So it's actually it's in some ways similar to Doki, but it's very much a purely kind of thriller, like a visual novel experience.
Kind of a straightforward visual novel, right?
Yeah, but there's gameplay to it, so
right.
it kind of becomes almost like a point and click adventure, whereby you're put into different environments and you have to investigate them, and you have to kind of piece together the clues to formulate, like, who's killing who and what's actually going on, and
right. Okay.
So kind of think murder mystery with some detective kind of elements, right?
That sounds actually kind of cool. Yeah.
So that's one of them, and then the other one is maybe more familiar to people, and you definitely heard about it because I've talked about it before.
Yes.
So Danganronpa. I've played the first Danganronpa game.
Okay.
So this is kind of like your battle royale style game, where a bunch of people are thrown into this facility, and it's basically like a game / experiment, kind of. Yeah, if when I say battle royale, you probably have a pretty good sense of what that means.
I think everybody would understand what it is, especially that it transcended its roots in the books and manga and anime and live action movies, and went into the pulpier culture with Western movies, and of course we are talking about battle royale games that everybody knows. Everybody and their grandma knows. But,
yeah.
So you only played two other games, visual novels before. Why is that? Because it looks like, it sounds like you have enjoyed both of them quite a bit. Why have you not played more?
So I have played a few more.
Okay.
I've tried a few more, but these are the two that I've actually played fully and I've completed. For the most part, I've done the main story.
Okay. Well, as for me, I've only properly fully completed, and when I say fully, I have completed it 100%. I liked it that much. I believe the game is called Endless Summer, if I'm not mistaken. Everlasting Summer is the name of the game. The premise is that you either get hit by a car or something happens in the current day. I think it's Moscow, and then you wake up in front of the gates of the pioneer camp during the Soviet Union.
I can see why that would appeal to you. Is that the premise?
So if you have watched any of my stuff, you would kind of know that I was born in the Soviet Union, right? And but I have never attended a pioneer's camp. So I was never a pioneer or even Oktyabryonik. It is more or less a dating sim. It's a dating sim, but there is a little bit more to it. It goes slightly into horror direction, depending on the choices you make, and if you 100% complete it, of course it does. So it was really quite fun, and actually I have loved it so much that they have released, I think it was Android only, expansion called Everlasting Winter. And I've played through that. I've really enjoyed that as well. Now, that's the only game, the only two games, if you'd like, I have played fully. I have tried a few others, and they were so memorable that I can't even remember their names, and I couldn't be bothered even looking them up. And we'll go into kind of a little bit about strengths and weaknesses of visual novels in a second. But the second, of course, part of the Doki Doki Literature Club is the horror genre. So I would be honest, I have tried to play quite a few different horror games over the years, and I'm a big wuss. So I think the ones that I have enjoyed the most were the Biohazard, or in the West it's called, what's the name of it in the West?
Resident Evil?
Resident Evil, that's the one. I have played a number of those games, and they scared the crap out of me, but they were quite interesting. So apart from that, I have tried a number of other games, and I just realized I'm too much of a wuss to play them. So that's pretty much all I can say about my horror gaming experience. What about yourself, Stipple?
Oh yeah, my horror gaming experience is a lot more expansive, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a wuss.
He's not a wuss at all. No, he's the opposite. He's the uber non-wuss.
I find those games actually quite enjoyable. So I like the idea of feeling a little bit unsettled, maybe feeling a little bit uneasy, and not quite knowing what's kind of around the next corner. I love the audio design in a lot of these games,
yes.
Because it's so crucial. And that's something we'll discuss later, because, I think Doki Doki does an interesting thing with audio as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's really a lot to love about horror games, and I can understand why someone would be put off by some of them, or at least not be able to kind of get into them because of their very nature of trying to kind of make you uncomfortable, make you scared, especially when they use like, tropes like, jump scares and cheap scares that a lot of people don't like. Even like myself, I'm quite, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest horror fan, but I am definitely a horror fan. I think everybody would agree that jump scares are very cheap, and for the most part, it's very difficult to create a good or an interesting jump scare, even though those do exist.
Yeah. And just for the audience, so what is your most favorite, let's say, your bestest of the bestest horror games that, in your opinion, is the bestest? And why do you like it? Maybe just in a couple of sentences.
In terms of the games, I'd mention Resident Evil. Not Biohazard. Okay. The series, I've played a lot of Resident Evil. So, funny enough, I have never finished the original Resident Evil, whether it's the original PlayStation 1 game or the remake on GameCube that was later ported.
Oh yeah. Never played.
I've played both of them, but I've actually never finished them. Right. I'm more of a, I guess you could call it kind of a more modern Resident Evil fan. So I like, Resident Evil 4. I like Resident Evil 2 remake, which was fantastic. I haven't played the third remake, but it's on my list. Mm-hmm. I loved Resident Evil 7, and I actually played that one in virtual reality. So at the time, it came out on PlayStation 4 on the PSVR, and I happened to have one, and it was like one of the most, definitely one of the most memorable gaming experience, I would say, in my life. Right. Then, like, I've played Dead Space, even just this year. I played the Dead Space remake. I thought that was amazing. I love the sci-fi setting, the atmosphere, all the tools you get to play around with, dismembering the xenomorphs and all that. Necromorphs, I think they call them.
Necromorphs.
Because the xenomorphs are alien, right?
Yes.
Even like a game like, say, Bloodborne or something like that, if you know visual language in a game like that, it's like so grotesque.
Yes.
And like the creatures themselves and the whole world is like covered in this like bile, and
kind of like body horror is
a little bit
turns you on.
Not quite, but it's it can be done very well.
Yeah,
so,
no, I agree. I agree. But I would still not play those games. Yes.
But Amnesia. So I played the Amnesia series, which
so this is closer to. I would feel that the Amnesia would be a little bit closer to Doki Doki because it's a lot of it is tension rather than shooting things.
You're powerless in the sense of you don't have a weapon.
Yeah.
Right. All you have is a lantern, and that's your light. Your guiding light is your lantern, and that's what you use to kind of to brave the environments and to overcome your fears. And it is also psychological horror. So this is where it does really much tie into Doki Doki. And you could say sometimes the visual design of something or the audio design of an area could also scare you and could put you in a certain mood.
Absolutely,
and create that atmosphere. That's super immersive.
It is.
But in terms of getting in your head, a game like Amnesia does a really good job of just kind of getting in your head. And there are jump scares as well in that game.
Right.
It is a lot of psychological horror, and that leads me to one of their following games, which is Soma. And Soma was probably one of my favorite experiences because it blends the hard sci-fi concepts and ideas with horror.
Yeah.
So I loved what they did with that game.
This kind of brings us back because I think both Soma and the Amnesia would nicely tie in to the Doki Doki Literature Club. Or specifically, we're talking about Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, but we will touch on the original Doki Doki Literature Plus as well. So, how much did you know about Doki Doki Literature Club before you started it?
Not a huge amount, but what I did know about Doki Doki, I suppose the legacy of it, because it's one of those games that people talked about for many years after it was released. So we know that the original version of Doki Doki, because I think it's important to say that we played the Doki Doki Literature Club Plus version of the game.
Yes.
Which is different from the original version that came out in 2015, which was freeware.
It's different, but it is also the main game is for the most part the same, and we will touch on the differences a little bit later on. But it has a couple of extra things, and it changes a few things the way that you interact with the game towards the end.
And what I knew about it was, we knew that it was re-released in this Plus version. I knew that they had added some new content. I also knew that the game was, it was labeled on Steam, and it's not a secret or anything. It's quite publicly known that the game is a horror or a psychological horror type experience. Yes. It's not what it appears on the surface, and that's kind of where the marketing and kind of how it was promoted as well, where it's this we're going to show it to you as a standard visual novel kind of experience, a dating simulator, and it looks visually like that. The art style evokes that feeling,
very much so.
But there's something under the surface, and why they don't go into it in the trailers. From what I know, from what I've seen,
they do not.
Yeah, you do. If you go to the Steam description, it does start kind of mentioning this is different than what you expect, and there's warnings and things like that. So the game already starts to, even when you launch it, it starts to warn you. So even before I launched it, I kind of had an idea in my head as to what the game was, which was, it's going to be trying to subvert your expectations, because inherently, if you're talking about a visual novel and a dating simulator game, you don't expect it to be horror, while that it has become kind of a genre in itself. I know that they rose in popularity after Doki Doki. That's definitely a true statement. So, I kind of knew, because of the whole subversion of expectations, there was a certain kind of air of, I had expectations of my own then going into the game that it was going to try and either trick me or trying to do something that was a little bit different. So as you're going in, mentally, my kind of thoughts were, I'm going to expect something that's not surface level. So it might start doing things, or we need to pay attention early on in the game, because as soon as you start,
we'll talk about paying attention in a little while as well. Yes, don't you worry, I will not forget that.
Not till the end. But you need to pay attention to the like I was going into it thinking, okay, this is going to be doing something different. Is kind of how I put it. Yeah,
and I think it's very interesting to note here because my kind of knowledge of the game was very similar to yours, and I think it bears mentioning that you have played games that really subvert. They set out as their statement of being a game that we will subvert your expectations before. So you already, even though you knew nothing about the game, just the fact that everybody's saying, oh, it's a horror game and it will subvert your expectations, you already kind of had an idea of what might happen, even if you didn't know what would actually happen. For me, I have approached it from a completely different angle because while I have played a few games that might subvert your expectations in terms of the story and things like that, I've never played anything that before Doki Doki that would totally subvert your expectations in terms of, let's say, gameplay point of view and how it did it. So again, we will get into the story in a little while. So when I went into the game, all I knew was it looks like a dating sim, but it is a horror game. What to expect, I don't know. But allegedly, it will do something different to surprise me. I did not know what it would do. So, and I think since we're talking about this right now, it would be a good time to draw a certain comparison to another game that prides itself on subverting your expectations, and that, of course, is Undertale. And you have played Undertale before. Before you've played Doki Doki, you've played Undertale quite a while ago. And when we were kind of discussing this a little bit earlier yesterday, I mentioned, well, were you not kind of expecting the Doki Doki to do similar things to Undertale? And your answer was very interesting. You said that actually, no, you didn't. But yet, you still had expectations of fourth wall breaking. So how does that work? So could you guide me through that a little bit? Because I want after you do, I want to talk a little bit about Undertale before we move on.
Yeah, so not even necessarily fourth wall breaking, but because you're inherently thinking about how is this game going to subvert my expectations.
Yes.
A lot of the time that media does subvert your expectations or does something surprising, I find is like, and that's just not just video games, like you're talking TV shows, movies, even books sometimes. And it's just in games, it's done sparsely because it's difficult to do well, I think.
Yep.
But I wasn't necessarily thinking about fourth wall breaks, but I was thinking about how is this game going to mess with my head.
Right. Okay.
And you can see how that trail, that logical trail leads to fourth wall breaks. So when the fourth wall breaks started happening, and we know that there's a lot of them and they do happen in the game. I guess it didn't surprise me as much. So in that sense, like I would say if I knew nothing about the game, like, and they didn't tell me anything, and I just sat down in a room and somebody placed me in the room and they told me nothing about the game and they said, play this game, that would be a different experience to me and to I think most people, whereby you're disconnected from what somebody online might have said, or you might have read a review on Steam, or you might have read even the description. Like I said, they kind of warn you, and the game warns you as soon as you start playing it.
Yes. And there are quite a number of warnings, actually. I think to one, you have to say, yes, you agree, you don't want to read the particulars of the trigger warnings.
Yeah, and that's where I have a little bit of a problem with that, honestly. A criticism, for sure, whereby I didn't like that the game was in your face telling you that, oh my God, that you have to be, you have to know that this game is going to, trigger some people. And I understand why it's there, because some people do require that, and it's it's for a broad audience, and it was a free game to begin with, so they're kind of saying, just go into this game, kind of knowing that there are more darker topics, and it basically goes into that, and like it does explain them to you if you select yes. And this is on the Plus edition, so I don't know how it handles that on the original.
I'm pretty sure, from what I understand, the original has a similar warning.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's the same, but it's definitely similar.
Yeah, and it is very kind of egregious. It's very kind of in your face, and the game is already telling you that be prepared, because it goes into these dark themes and territory. You know? So there's a lot about the game that's already, before you even play it, before you even hit the start game button, it's warning you. You already seen something online about it. It's like there's a lot of these kind of things coming at you. Yeah. While for a lot of other games that I play, I don't necessarily feel it's that egregious, where it's like it's literally telling you, like, be careful, with this game. And I appreciate it, and I understand why it's there, but at the same time, for me, it didn't quite like, I didn't need that. Like I would have been very much happy to go in not knowing anything. But that's my own personal preference.
I think I partially agree with you. I agree that I personally did not need those trigger warnings. However, I would say that I am happy that they're there, because the themes that the game touches on can definitely be very, very triggering. And if you're not prepared for it, if you have gone through something similar in your personal life, in your real life, and all of a sudden this theme just pops up, and that can be a serious issue, and that can lead to a lot of mental health problems. So I understand why they have done it, and I actually, even though I personally didn't need it, I thought that it is a good idea that they did. But
yeah, actually, just on that point, I do agree with you. As I said, I appreciate that it's there for the people that might be going through something as they're playing the game, and they mightn't be in the mental state to be able to handle something like that. Yeah. So yeah, I do, and especially because the game you'd almost feel like the game tricked you. Like if you just downloaded it based on how it looked in the screenshots, and you looked at nothing else, you'd feel like, oh, this game, like, no, I can't believe it did this, and it goes into these really dark topics. I thought it was going to be a fun, family-friendly adventure,
Family-friendly, let me date all the girls, and preferably together at the same time. Yes. As most dating games kind of are. But anyway.
And it's, what you call it, it states that the girls are all over the age of 18 as well, even though
they are in high school. Is it? Are they?
Yeah, like and like when I was in school, when I was in my final year, I was 17, and a lot of my peers, because I was in an all boys school, in a Catholic school, and everybody was like, there was like one or two guys that had just turned 18 by the time school ended. That was like a huge deal.
That's just because it was a Catholic school. You see, in a girls' schools or mixed schools, as in this instance, everybody's 18 all the time. 19. They start in junior school and they're 18. They go to middle school, they're 18, and then they go to high school and they're still 18. So it's all good. Don't worry about it. Well, actually, since you mentioned it, I did not want to kind of go into this topic, but since you mentioned it, I think I should mention that as well. So, talking about the characters being 18, so it will not be a surprise to anyone who kind of even just glanced at the game to know that the game at least starts as a dating sim. So, as somebody who is, well, let's face it, I'm middle-aged now. I can officially proclaim to the world I am middle-aged. So, as somebody who is middle-aged, while I understand that the character in the game is the same age as your main character, right? Your protagonist, shall we say, is the same age as the girls in the game. Because some of the girls are specifically made to look much younger than they are, and there is a reason for that, but it's it created a kind of a weird feeling for me. How should I actually behave on the stream, streaming this to a live audience? Not even just me playing, because me playing, I don't need to worry about anything. But whenever you're streaming it to an audience, you're always thinking in your mind, well, what would the audience think, right? So what would the audience think if a middle-aged man is playing a game where you are dating girls allegedly 18, but clearly look like they're not? Or at least one of them looks like they're not. Doesn't mean that they're not, but that's just the way it is. So, and that's, I've actually spoken to my partner about that, and we had an interesting conversation. But it definitely created an interesting dilemma, and I kind of decided that, you know what, I'm just gonna play it because we shall enjoy art for what it is, and not worry too much about what other people think. But I definitely had a kind of a little bit of a idea that I had to wrestle with. Let's put it that way. But let's bring this back a little bit to the conversation about how your knowledge of the game affects your perception when you play it. And the reason why I'm doing that is because you clearly were expecting Doki Doki to very heavily subvert your expectations. And even though you weren't expecting the fourth wall breaks, kind of you were expecting them without expecting them. Let's put it that way. You were ready for them when they came up.
I was prepared because I was already switched on to like, this game is going to do something that's out of the ordinary, and not what it, like I said, it's not like it appears initially. Yeah.
And so for me, I went in not expecting any fourth wall breaking at all whatsoever. I just thought it would be kind of cutesy, and then people are gonna start killing each other. Basically, that's what I thought. Or maybe some other horror stuff would start happening, but it's not gonna be this meta sort of narrative that goes over the kind of immediately obvious dating sim narrative, right? The stories that happen on the first layer, let's put it that way. So for me, though, and this is why I wanted to mention, I'm playing Undertale right now, and if you're watching my streams, you would know I'm playing Undertale. I have bounced off that game very hard originally, and even though I've kind of tried not to know anything about it, over the years, you hear a thing or two, and you know that game, the whole shtick of the game is to subvert your expectations. And from the very, very beginning, it's kind of saying, ha, let's break fourth wall all the time. Having already played Doki Doki Literature Club, when the manipulation of the game and comes in the Undertale towards the end, it wasn't actually a big surprise to me. It was like, yeah, okay, I've seen this before. Oh, and by the way, all the people that are watching the Undertale streams, that are fans of the Undertale, have been giving you hints throughout as well. Not necessarily spoiling things, but just by this whole kind of building up your expectations with, oh my god, you're not gonna believe this. When the time came for this subversion to happen, I was kind of like, yep, okay, fair enough. I kind of seen that coming, even though I didn't know exactly what form it would take. So I think it's interesting that even if you might not know a lot about the game, that this plays a huge part in your interaction with the game, and maybe even your enjoyment, I would go so far as to say. What do you reckon, Stipple?
Yeah, actually, I have a kind of a point that leads it back into Doki Doki. So from what you were talking about, in terms of how you felt playing Undertale with people telling you how to play it,
yes,
and kind of giving you little hints and saying, because from my perspective, Undertale is definitely one of these games that I would call a community game.
Yeah.
Where the people in the community try to help other people that are are starting the game because they like. It's almost like I want to say it's almost like a little cult because like they're literally.
It really is a cult.
but that's what I mean by community. It's like everybody in it is in on the jokes, and everybody in it wants other people to see all the jokes and see kind of the layers in between the game that you might not notice. But then if they spell it out for you and they're kind of pushing you towards it, then you're losing a sense of kind of agency and enjoyment from the game as you're playing it, because you're not going to be as surprised. So it's kind of similar to what I was talking at the very top of the conversation, where it's like I was already going with certain expectations because of what I knew of what the kind of the internet and what a couple of things I saw on the internet. Because you see Doki Doki, and if I just saw a screenshot, I'd write it off and I'd never play it. But I didn't need to dig a little bit deeper and like look at what a few people said about it and said, oh, this is a really special experience and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And they didn't go into any detail, but it is a similar kind of effect where like the community is telling you this game is really cool and there's more to it. And while they're not pushing you like live on stream like they were with you, it's a similar kind of feeling to me where and I think this will lead into the next bit of our conversation where it's like, how much of the game did you complete and how much of the game have you seen? And this ties into Undertale as well, where it's like, you can do one playthrough and you can get enjoyment out of that for sure. You can, there's various playthroughs there and you can do one and be like, I'm done with the game and I had a good time. That's kind of how I played it. And I had a fine time. But you're technically, and the community would say, I tell you, you're playing the game wrong because you haven't seen the entire experience.
Exactly. You haven't completed the game, right? Even though you reached one ending, it's an ending. It's not the ending because you haven't seen everything there is to see.
Yeah. So from how I played Doki Doki, and I play a lot of my games like this where I try to mainline the game. If especially with modern games that are like, obviously Doki Doki is a very small game, but like when I'm talking about like open world games or games that give you options and you're like, I can do the main story and complete the main game and you see like the core part of the experience, or I can deviate and start going and doing side quests and side content and this and mini games and this and that and different things like that in modern gaming, right? So I generally just go for the main path and then I might do a little bit of the side content, but I'm not a completionist at all. So when I came into Doki Doki, the way I played it was I played it once and I completed it and I got the normal ending that everybody would see if they play it once. And then I said, well, that was a good experience. I enjoyed that. I think I'll just stop there. And there's I don't think there's anything specific wrong with that. But I think in terms of what the game is, and as you look at it from kind of the outside, or if you're even part of the community, you know that there's so much more to the game than just the first playthrough. So the way I played it was I did the first playthrough, and then I went online. And I was like, okay, what? I know there's more to this game because that's kind of what's implied as you finish it and you get the normal ending, and it's implied that there's more to it. So I was like, I kind of need to go online because I don't really know what I have to do. Like it doesn't overtly explain to you. You have to do X and Y.
It does not.
So that's one of my criticisms as well, where it's like I felt like I got a great experience of the one playthrough, but from knowing more about the game and then reading a little bit online, I'm like, technically, if you want the full experience, you kind of have to do everything, and you have to get all the relationships in the game and build out those and save at the right time so that you can get all those. And then you have to do this specific thing at the end. And it's like, there's a lot of steps there that like somebody had to go in there and kind of really delve into the game and figure this out. Like, if I play this on my own without the context of the internet and other community element and people kind of helping each other online, I honestly don't think I would have ever discovered it. Even if I was trying to kind of get the true ending, I think I might have struggled because I didn't quite know the path I had to take, right?
I agree with you there. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming from, how much of the game I've completed. So I did that, and then I read a little bit about like the good ending, Sayori's ending, I think it's known as well. And then I read about I knew the side stories from the Doki Doki Literature Club Plus.
Yes.
Were there, and I thought, okay, this sounds like an additional content, and it's kind of, in a way, it's almost disconnected from the main narrative, but it's also connected to all the characters. So I'm like, that's kind of cool. I might just do those because I want to get to know the characters a bit more.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is I ended up, and the way I actually did it, I didn't do it through the game. I looked up a YouTube video because I thought, well, this is part of the game is completely like, just text format. Yeah. You can consume it like through a video and you get exactly the same experience because there's no choices, there's no agency there. So
and of course, the YouTube video that you have looked up was mine. My playthrough.
Oh,
I understand that.
Yeah, yes, of course. The greatest playthrough of all time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Never. No. But but I do want to shout out one channel, actually, if there's people that they're watching.
Yes, go ahead.
There is one channel, and I think I would say if you've already finished the game, I would say it's still worth going back. And if you've done the side stories, or maybe you haven't done the side stories because you've only completed the original, this channel and what the person, so it's a woman, and she's not a professional voice actor, but she has a really high quality microphone, and she has, to be honest, like she does a really good job of getting in the heads of each of the individual 4 characters that they portray in the side stories, and giving them more personality through the voice, and in terms of their inflection, the nuance in the way she delivers the dialogue. Like, honestly, I had an amazing experience just listening to her voice all of those characters. And the channel is an extremely agitated hedgehog. Okay. So that's an extremely agitated hedgehog.
Yeah, sure. So there you go. Go and check that out, guys, because it is. I haven't actually had a chance, unfortunately, because I only found out about that yesterday nighttime. We had a chat just before I went to bed, but do go and check it out. I believe it is really, really worth it. So, as for me, regarding the completing of the game, I have theoretically completed 100% completed the game. However, that is not the case. So if I go to my pictures, in terms of Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, in terms of what you have unlocked, there are still a number of things that haven't been unlocked. And the reason for that is because there are certain things, even though you have experienced 100% of the story, there are certain things that you have to do, you have to go and figure out, that would unlock you all the achievements and give you all of the different collectibles, right? So in terms of the story, I have 100% completed the game, and I have received a letter from the creator at the end, and if you have 100% completed, you know what I'm talking about. So this is kind of where we are both at in terms of completing the story. And this would dictate our experiences and what we think about different parts of it. So I reckon we're gonna go and we're gonna start talking about the story, because we have been on the intro for an hour. I think we should dive into the meat of the matter. By the way, we are doing this live on Twitch, so viewers, if you have any questions, and that is okay if you don't, but if you do have any questions for us regarding the game, any questions that might arise during our conversation, do feel free to shout out in the comments, and we will address them, of course. I do, of course, also apologize in advance that we're not able to do specific shout-outs, as we're doing this kind of discussion just for the sake of saving a little bit of time. Right. But first, of course, I will preempt all the viewer questions with this one question. Everybody wants to know, what is your favorite character, Stipple?
Mine, okay.
Who is it?
Are you ready?
Oh, you better be.
Are you ready? So, okay, I'm going to do it like this. So I think all the characters are great, and they're really well developed. I love the writing in the game.
Yeah.
I think they did an amazing job of fleshing out all the characters. I think some more than others in the base game, but like it from my own context. From my own context, yeah, like I didn't do all of the individual character stories within the base game.
Yes.
But even with what I had, and you do spend quite a bit of time with all of them, even despite that, so you get a good sense of the characters, and then the side stories obviously expand on them as well. So I'm taking that into my own
yeah, absolutely
context. So So
Yes. Yes.
I would say for me, I think Sayori was the girl.
Okay.
Was the girl, because she, from my point of view, was kind of the glue that held together that held the club together, the literature club itself. And there's a few, even in the base game, there's a few examples of it where when she is deleted, as in when she dies and you move on to the second playthrough, essentially.
Yes.
When that happens, well, obviously the game starts changing and whatnot. But one of the key things that happens is Monica starts messing with the characters, as you know. And she starts, but she was already, we know that she was already messing with the characters and their code and how they were behaving, and they were kind of overly, I suppose they were kind of exaggerated versions of themselves, and they started throwing themselves at you. But what happens is, when Sayori is removed from the picture, I think it escalates, and you're left with Yuri, and you're left with Natsuki and Monica in the middle.
Yeah.
And what happens is they start arguing and bickering and getting in a kind of really, really extremely intense very quickly. And I felt that Sayori was kind of the key to holding it together in that moment.
Interesting. I disagree, really and I want to come back to that. I actually disagree slightly about your earlier point as well. I just want to put it out, but do continue. We'll come back to this.
So to me, from my own perspective, Sayori really held the group together, and she was the mediator in a lot of their disputes. So whenever Monica had issues, she didn't quite know how to deal with some of the disputes, especially between Yuri and Natsuki, because they were so different. So like polar opposites in some sense, in terms of how they're how they behave. And so to me, Sayori really was kind of the glue that held it together, and she was the mediator, and she always kind of came in, and she was very empathetic even in the base game compared to the other characters. So, but then
again, hard disagree, but we'll discuss that later on.
You can disagree as much as you want, but that's my opinion. So and then even in the side stories, she really gets kind of her time to shine even more, because you're delving into all the different relationships. Yeah, and at many points throughout, there were examples of how she was more sympathetic than the other characters. She felt a little bit more grown up. She was able to have more empathy and to kind of understand the situation a little bit better. Of course, she wasn't perfect, but compared to all of the other characters, it was like a standout, without a doubt to me, that she was just way more mature in some ways than they were. So that's the reason why I like her the most. Right. She felt like a more well-rounded, kind of more balanced character. And I know she had the darker side as well, of course, but she was trying to help people, and she was trying to be the balance. That's kind of why I liked her.
Okay, interesting. For me, of course, because people will be asking, well, what about you? So for me, I think, again, similar to Stipple, I agree that all of the characters are fantastically characterized, and they are very deep, and I love them all equally, including Monica, of course, because she's the love of my life. But the one character that I empathize with the most in the main game, well, actually, side stories as well, but I think she was the weakest in the side stories. And it kind of annoyed me that we're retreading the same ground with her in the side stories compared to the main game, would be Yuri. So when I was younger, and as I have kind of been discussing during my playthrough on Twitch of the game, I was very, very introverted, and you wouldn't get 2 words out of me. And I was into reading, fantasy, science fiction, etc. And I was pretty much a loner, very much like Yuri. So seeing somebody exactly the same as I was before, I'm still an introvert. I'm just not as reclusive as I used to be. Some people might disagree, but that is that is my take on it. So seeing someone like that really made me empathize with them, and I thought that Yuri was really the way that she is not as like everybody else, all the other characters, but not as simple as she first seen as well, was really quite interesting.
So the question, are you saying Yuri is your favorite character?
Yes, Yuri would be my favorite because I was able to empathize with her the most.
Well, I actually think that's interesting because I think the question of favorite is different to the question of which one did you empathize more with, because I have a different answer for two of those.
Okay, right. Well, go for it. For me, it's the same. So...
Yeah, no, I can understand where you're coming from, because since you empathize and you're like, I can relate to this character more individually as myself, like personally. Yeah, and I actually felt that with the side stories. I would slightly disagree because I thought Yuri, and maybe it's because I spent less time with Yuri, although I did spend some time with Yuri in the base game. I actually felt that some of the things, specific lines that she said in the side stories resonated with me. Yeah. As well, because I am more of an introvert as well. Maybe I think we're not that different, but there's definitely like nuance there where we're different levels of introversion and how we kind of like spending time with ourselves and whatnot. And there's a couple of things that she said in the side stories that really did resonate with me, which is like how she found it difficult to be in group settings, and that how she found to have an easier time of communicating with people one-to-one. So that was one thing she directly said in the side stories. And it's very fresh in my head, just by the way, because I experienced it yesterday. So I know I can kind of almost quote from it, but yeah, that really resonated with me because I've always found it very difficult to kind of find, and it's the wording. I think that's where the writing is really strong, where like it's the exact wording that what's the name of the guy, Dan, because I know he writes all the stuff.
Salvato, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Dan Salvato, like he clearly has based on all the writing in the
Doki.
In the game, like there's a little bit of him in all of the characters, and he's clearly gone through, either him or people close to him have gone through some of the things that the characters have gone through and experienced and felt, and it really carries through. Like it feels like a very personal. It's very personally written, I would say.
It is, yes, yeah.
And while the characters are all different, there are common themes, like those that the darker kind of like there's something behind what they're saying, and they're not necessarily saying it explicitly, which they sometimes do, but yeah. And that's what I felt with Yuri, that I could resonate with her kind of the loneliness aspect, and then the not being comfortable in group settings. And that really, when I read that, I was like, wow, that was I can completely relate, because it's been like all throughout my childhood and even college and post college, I found it very difficult to be in group settings, and I've always found it like easier to just hang out with one person. Right. There's a few other things he said, but I just wanted to note that. And I think
that's interesting as well. Yeah, because for me it's one the same, but for you it's slightly different.
Yeah, I felt more, like more personally linked with Yuri, I guess, with some of the things she said. Not everything, but definitely some. I definitely some of the stuff she said resonated. Yeah. But with Sayori, I was just impressed with her as kind of like from a character perspective, and how like I was explaining, like she seemed like kind of the glue, and she was trying so hard the whole time. I kind of really felt for her, and I really enjoyed how. And actually, that's why initially when she died, I felt I was a little bit upset, but it was a little bit surprising, but not too surprising, because again,
not coming back surprising. To okay.
Yeah, But then as I kind of got to know her more, and then especially with the side stories and all the extra stuff that I discovered, I was like, yeah, no, I love her. I love her even more now. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective.
And I think this leads us perfectly into kind of the next point that I wanted to raise. So it's the thoughts on the story prior to the festival, but I want to ask you specifically about Sayori. All right, so she's your favorite character. At what stage did you realize that she's going through depression?
Yeah, good question. Pretty early on.
Spoilers, but we've said that already. So yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is this was spoilers,
yes.
so that's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
So yeah, I going back, it's even more obvious, especially if you look at her first poem. Like if you read the first poem, it's extremely obvious that she's suffering from depression. But in terms of the first kind of playthrough and the first experience, trying to pinpoint the exact point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, yeah, like apart from, I can't remember the exact point. I think that's the problem. Maybe you have something in your head, so maybe you can start. And then
sure. For me, it's very easy. It's literally the opening of the game.
Oh, really? What did she say?
That's it. She didn't. It's the narration. What happened? Basically, what the main character says. That we were very close friends, and then she started, oversleeping, etc., etc. I'm like, oh my god. She's
yeah.
I'm like, oh, so this is where the horror is gonna come in. She's like, we're gonna be going into the mental health issues. So that was my first thing. And then, of course, somebody in the stream blurted, she's depressed, or something to that effect. Not maybe in that voice, but...
They were screaming maniacally at the microphone, even though there was nobody listening to them.
yes. And once they said that they kind of confirmed that to me. But
okay.
If you rewatch my playthrough, it's the first my first stream on YouTube about Doki Doki. I literally said it. Oh, right. Well, there are like all indications that she's depressed. I didn't exactly go out and say, oh, she's depressed, but I said, right, we actually see all the indications that she might be. And of course, as the things go on, and the story gets us closer and closer to the point of no return, you see more and more, and then by the time where she doesn't show up to school on a festival day, I was dreading to go back to her room, because I was already, even though I was expecting it, I was hoping it was not the what has happened. But the way that it's done, it's not like, oh, I've seen this plot twist mile away. It wasn't like that at all. It was more of a, oh my god, I hope it's not this. I hope it's not this. And you go into her room and it's bam, and it's like I was just there in shock still. Just the way it was done, the way it was handled was really well done, I thought.
But different for me. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Because I did not start thinking about that straight away. Well, even from the first time, because obviously, you're clearly, you going in like you must have had that kind of thought process in your head, because I didn't. I just kind of read the lines, and I was kind of. It was funny because I was playing it with my partner as well, and we were sitting on the couch playing it, and we were alternating reading the lines. So I was reading all the girls, and she was reading the main protagonist, which it was funny because we thought the main protagonist could be a girl at first, but it turns out that they were kind of forcibly pushing into a male role, especially with because they keep referring you to his.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And I don't think it was like that in the original, actually, which is interesting, because I was Googling around, and apparently it isn't stated at all. So I'm curious to know if there's differences.
Maybe Nintendo bought the license to do it on Nintendo, and they said, you know what, we have to have traditional family values in there. It has to be a heterosexual relationship. No other is allowed. I mean, knowing Nintendo and that it is a Japanese company, that could have had an influence.
I don't know. Is Nintendo, were they publishing it or something? Like,
yeah. So that it released on Switch, didn't it?
Well, but it was Switch and PlayStation as well. And
was it PlayStation as well? I didn't realize it was PlayStation. Actually, yes, it was PlayStation. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I think there's definitely a choice if that was a change from the original, because I was looking at like threads from years, like 6 years ago, which is closer to when the original came out, and people were saying that it was never explicitly stated, and I was like, that's weird because they keep saying his. And they're referring you to as a male in the Plus version. So I kind of want to look into that more. But from what I saw, that's the impression I was getting.
Interesting.
Like it doesn't, like, when you know what's actually happening in the game, it doesn't really matter who the main protagonist
it doesn't matter
is
at all. No,
it's actually irrelevant. But it's kind of interesting if that was a choice that they made, that kind of makes you ask a few questions.
Also, let me go out and just say that the main character is an absolute asshole, and they should be shot. But anyway,
I wouldn't go that far. I actually
when I say shot,
I wasn't that offended by.
I'm not. Actually,
no, exactly. No, but I didn't actually have any major. There was a couple of times, but then where the main protagonist either thinks something or says something stupid. But then a lot of the times they kind of bring it back, and then there's a little bit more kind of empathy. So I didn't actually find it that bad, but there was a couple of times for sure.
Yeah, but bringing us back to the story before the festival.
So with Sayori,
and Sayori, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, because when first I mentioned, the first thing you said it is quite obvious they want us to like Sayori. And I'm like, why is it obvious? And then I realized that you went down the Sayori's path in terms of interacting with the creation of the poems. And it was Sayori's path that brought you to the end, or to the beginning of the festival. So which was very interesting. So what are your thoughts on the story prior to the festival? Keeping in mind that you have done Sayori's path for that.
Yeah, that's true. But I think I remember I was talking about this weeks ago when I had just started playing it, and you spend more time with Sayori even in the early game, in the very beginning, because you're walking with her and you have a personal relationship with Sayori, and she introduces you to the club. And you already feel that connection, even though it's like there's not that much dialogue. I actually felt the connection already. And while everybody else was a stranger. So like from like a realistic sense, where like if I was going somewhere and I was going there with a friend that was taking me, even if maybe we had drifted apart, they were still my friend, and I had been close to them years before. I'd feel way closer to that person than whoever I was being introduced to. So I did really get a sense of that. And I think, again, that just shows you the quality of the writing in the game. But let's
talk about the story in general, I suppose. So so not just kind of the quality of the writing, but the story itself. So what were your thoughts? What was going through your head as you have reached? So before let's say the Sayori's ending, what were your thoughts up to that point?
Yeah, since I did the Sayori path, you spend more time with her. Yeah, you get to know her a bit more. Then she starts saying things like, "Oh," she becomes uncomfortable. I can't remember the exact lines, and she runs out of the classroom. This was before you get the choice to hang out with one of the other girls to help them for the festival. And around that point was where I was like, okay. And I was sitting there with my partner, and we were both kind of like, yeah, okay, there's kind of something going on there. She's based on a couple of things she said, and the way she was acting. It sounded like there was more to it, and then it felt like that's where the game was heading, right? Kind of that kind of mental health direction, right? Which is what you kind of noticed, that you picked up on that pretty early,
yeah.
But yeah, and then from there, we kind of almost predicted that she was going to be the first one to go, right? And when it happened, it wasn't like it was really like, it was done well. It was kind of shocking and surprising in one sense, but at the same time, we could kind of sense that it was coming, and right. it was one of the definitely one of the key moments in the game, because that triggers the rest of the story and the narrative, and I really
definitely does, yeah.
I love that, because she dies, and then the screen, I can't remember the exact sequence, but the screen basically cuts away, and then you're back to you have to start again. And then you're like, what the hell's going on? And but actually just on that point, when we were playing that early game, I remember I was talking to you and you were saying something about, oh, you picked that character or whatever. And I was like, well, I didn't realize I had a choice. And
but we'll get back to that. We'll get back to the mechanics.
There's a point. No, there's a point here. Okay. I'm making a point. And then you say, and then you go, oh, there's a choice. And I was like, well, you can't do that unless the game has some sort of loop mechanic where you can loop back. And that goes back to I've played a lot of games and everything, but that it didn't spoil it for me. But I was anticipating it coming because you said something, and then that made me think about, okay, well, clearly you're going to be looping back and talking to these characters and picking them again. So in that sense, again, it's what we were talking about very early on, which was like, knowing certain things about the game makes it less impactful. And I do think the game was less, I loved it, and I got a lot out of it. And I did enjoy all the plot beats and the story, but I think it had slightly less impact because of things external to the game, for sure.
Interesting, yeah. So, and that brings us back to what we were talking about, how knowledge of the game prior to playing it has an impact, of course. Right. Well, as for me, I thought that the story was actually done really, really well for the first part, and I really enjoyed getting to know all the characters and kind of the dating part of it, where you get to kind of spend time with different characters and by writing poems, etc. And I was trying to actually please everyone to begin with, because from the very first go, I have thought, all right, the game advertises itself as horror, and from the very, very opening scene, from the very first moment we're introduced to the world, we already know that the Sayori is having some kind of issues, maybe slight issues, but clearly it has been going on for some time since they have fallen off being like close friends. So she's having trouble. So everybody else would be having trouble, and as long as we please everyone, everybody would be totally fine, and we'll be hunky-dory. So I was trying to please everyone, and I actually got to spend time with Natsuki first, then with Yuri and Sayori, etc. So that was, I thought that the way that the characters are introduced, and then as you're spending time with different characters, what I started realizing is that, hold up, like Natsuki seems to be this, hedgehog. Basically, tsundere is the term for anime and Japanese lovers, and of course for dating sim lovers, because a lot of them are Japanese. Tsundere is the term where somebody appears that they hate you, but actually they love you. But the way that she portrays herself is very much like big hedgehog or small hedgehog in her instance, and she doesn't let anybody in. But when she does let you in, you all of a sudden start realizing actually that there are troubles there, and that's why the way she behaves the way she does. And then when you start spending time with Sayori, you realize that actually her depression is definitely much more, and through their poems and through the interaction, that is what you actually come to see and realize, or I have come to see and realize quite early on. And then, of course, there are hints that Monica is doing self-harm and things like that. So, and I thought that the build-up was really, really good. Sorry, go ahead.
You mean, you said Monica's doing self-harm? You mean Yuri, right?
I meant Yuri, my apologies. I meant Yuri, yes. Monica. Okay. And Monica is actually what was interesting, that Monica was not doing self-harm at all. And, of course, Monica is the first person that breaks the fourth wall. And at the time, and I actually asked you yesterday, what did you think of that? When did you think that the first fourth wall was broken? And you're like, oh, I am not quite sure what was it, what was exactly the moment. But for me, it was quite interesting because she literally says, "Don't forget to save the game."
Yeah, no, I actually thought about it. I thought about that after, because I didn't in the moment think of it, and then I was thinking about what were the moments, and there was that one, and which was very early on. I can't remember how early though. Maybe you remember how early that was?
It is. I think it's after you write. It's either prior to writing the first poem or right after writing the first poem. So it's in the very beginning of the game where Monica says, "Hey, don't forget to save." Haha.
Yeah.
And I've copped on straight away. I'm like, "Oh my god, she's breaking the fourth wall. What's going on here?" And I'm like, "Oh, they're gonna hit us with all the horror now," and they don't. And you're like, "Hold up, was this part of the tutorial message? That might have been part of the tutorial message." And then she drops another hint, and I can't remember what that was, but that was another breaking of the fourth wall. And you're like, "Oh my god, yeah, it is happening, it is happening." And again, they're like holding it back.
Yeah, there was one, I think maybe the one you're thinking of is when she says something about, "Oh, you're a two-dimensional character." She says it to, like, I can't remember, it was to Natsuki or to Yuri. And then they correct her and I go, "Wait, don't you mean a one-dimensional character?"
Yes.
And she's like, "Yeah, sure."
Exactly. And that's brilliant. And of course, her poem "Save Me, Load Me" is fantastic. And we'll come to the poems in a little bit, but that is another fourth wall breaking thing that she does. I think before the two-dimensional character line.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I do remember the save, because we were sitting on the couch and we both, like, I was, because I was kind of looking out for details, like, as to what are they going to do with this?
Yeah.
And then when she says, I was like, "Oh, well, there's your first fourth wall break. So clearly they're going to go with this direction,
Interesting.
So it was interesting. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Your thoughts on a kind of story before festival we have heard, but what are your thoughts on the Sayori's ending? And then, of course, because you have touched on that already, so don't feel like you need to spend too much. And then we're going to move onto the plot twist itself.
Yeah. So Sayori's ending, do you mean up until when she kills herself and then it moves back?
Well, yeah. So Sayori's ending is when there is a suicide and the game ends.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because okay. So up until that point, like, I think I probably have covered it already, but I kind of did have a sense that it was coming. But then when it actually happened and the glitching starts, because, like, right after it cuts out and the game basically resets and there's like a restart screen, and then you're back in the menu. But then the menu says, instead of new game, it says, I think, continue, or it says something. I can't remember.
It doesn't actually say anything. It has a jumble of uneligible characters. So you actually, it's like, it's a glitch, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So at that point you're like, okay, what are you doing, game? What's happening? Yeah, then it starts getting into your head. So that's where the psychological horror comes in. And I love that. And we were sitting there and we're like, okay, just gonna press the button, I guess, see what happens. And then obviously you go past that. But that was great. I think leading up till then, it was a very straightforward story. Yeah, that maybe one or two fourth wall breaks, and then. But other than that, nothing too unusual. And then the suicide, which is like the big higher impact moment, the first one in the game. And then the shock of, like, it kind of starts throwing you for a loop, and it's great. I really enjoy that.
And this is kind of the plot twist that I kind of mentioned earlier on. So I think I also covered the impact that Sayori's ending had on me. And I thought that it was done supremely well. And we will cover this in themes a little bit more, but the ending itself was very impactful. And I thought that the tension that they were building up to it was fantastic. How at first you're like, when is this gonna happen? This is not a horror. What's going on? Yeah. This is just a dating sim. Like, I spent, I think, maybe 2 or 3 streams just going through the dating sim, and I'm like, what the hell is actually going on here? Where's the horror gonna happen? And you're like,
where's the game?
well, no, I really enjoyed all the themes that they were covering, so I'm like, I'm on board with this, but I was expecting something more. And then when Sayori's ending happens, I didn't want it to be true before I opened the door, and then you open the door and you're like, oh my god, no. It was very, very shocking in the best of ways, even though I could see it coming. As for the plot twist, of course, the plot twist, and if you're just joining us, go and play the game, don't watch a spoiler cast. But if for the plot twist, of course, is that nothing of this is real, right? So that all of the characters are just playing a role, and somebody is manipulating things behind the behind the game. So you get, as you said, the corrupted text. And then physically, you first start to interact with Sayori, and then she is erased from existence.
Forever.
Yes, indeed.
Or not.
So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Where you're like, oh my god, yeah, let's go. We're off to the races now.
No, literally, like I said, it throws you for a loop, and then this is the part where the psychological horror comes in, and the game starts playing with your head. And I was like, the game's starting finally. Let's go. not that I didn't enjoy the first part. I'm not saying that. I just mean this is what I was hoping from the game. And my partner was also kind of saying, as we were playing, she's like, this is kind of boring. Like, she doesn't really play games, and she's like, when is something going to happen? Because all we were doing was hanging out with them in the classroom. And that was kind of it. So it was nice to kind of, for the plot to move forward, I think.
And it's interesting that you mentioned, because I let my partner, I have forced my partner to play the game by herself. And she doesn't play games, so this is the first game, not only that she has sat down and played on her own by herself, this is the first game that she has completed as well, which is very, very important. So we have tried playing a couple of games together. It never really worked out. I'm talking about computer games here. We have played and enjoyed quite a lot of tabletop role-playing games, but that is a different story. And she was exactly the same. She was like, you know what, this is like, I know you want me to play it, and yeah, they're like covering kind of interesting topics, but this is kind of boring. I don't really want to go back to it and play it again. I'm like, just, keep going, you'll get there. And when the plot twist happened, I didn't even once need to say keep going. She literally completed the game in like almost 1 or 2 sittings after that. So yes, I agree that for people who do not play games, I suppose, because I think both your partner and my partner, they're very similar in that regard. The plot twist definitely spiced things up.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. It helps because our perspective is we know how games work, and we know sometimes it takes a while for them to get going, and they're just building towards the main narrative, right? So we knew, but the way I kind of tried to do it was give as little information as possible, so that for her it is even kind of like more surprising.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was the way to do it. But
same with me. I just told her this is horror and you have to play it. I think you'd be
you have to play it.
That's exactly what I said. You have to play it. Like I will take no for an answer. I will not take no for an answer.
You're like, I'll sign the divorce papers right now. You don't.
You must play this or else. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, so I thought this is interesting that their perspective was almost identical in terms of the first part of the game.
Yeah.
But after the plot twist happens, of course, a lot of stuff happening, and you start seeing more glitches. You start seeing characters talking, saying things that they wouldn't actually say, almost saying things that they think, but in a very over-exaggerated manner.
Yeah.
And which characterized by, of course, black text. And that is maybe not necessarily what they would normally say. So there is of course the main plot twist, but what did you think of the fact that? What did you think of when Yuri kills herself? Because I thought that was extremely impactful as well.
Yes, I would agree, because you get a sense very early on that she was hurting herself and self-harming.
Yes.
Even in one of the early poems, there's mention of knife, and when you reread one of the other poems, she was clearly talking about cutting herself. Yeah. And then when you spend some time with her, because I spent time with her, you select her, and you realize that there's a darkness to her, and very quickly you kind of know, well, what could be the potential outcome now that I know what I know from the beginning of the game, and since Sayori killed herself, what's the logical outcome here? So you get a sense of what's going to happen and where the game is going. But the way it's done, it goes full on horror, where it's the way it's visually depicted and how she literally stabs herself multiple times. It's very visceral and graphic. So I did think that was another key impact moment in the game, and I didn't want it to happen, because I think the game does a great job of characterizing everyone and making them feel like actual people. So at no point was I like, oh, that's fine. No, I actually did feel for the character, and like, oh no, why is this happening? And I understand that was part of her, and in terms of maybe she would have done it at some point, but clearly there was something else going on, which we later learn was Monica,
which we learned immediately, almost. Well, and here is where I want to kind of express my feelings on that, because immediately is a keyword there. I thought that. Go ahead.
So sorry, just after she does that, there is one thing that happens, and it's not immediate. So you literally have to spend.
That's what I wanted to talk about, actually. Can I go through this? Because it had a very huge impact on me.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm sure it might have had impact on you too, but I just think it's done supremely well. So the Yuri stabbing herself is very shocking, of course. A lead up to it, you're like, oh, okay, right, well, what's going on here? Oh, hold up. No, this is not going where I think it's gonna go. Bam, she stabs herself. And you're almost like, oh, no. That didn't just happen. With Sayori, I could see it a little bit, I could see it coming, and I didn't want it to happen. With Yuri, I just realized what's gonna happen just as the question is being asked, and just as you answer, you're like, oh crap, and bam, she stabs herself. So that was very shocking. However, the beauty of the storytelling there is that the way the game makes you experience time after Yuri kills herself. And you spend literally whole weekend together with Yuri in the classroom alone, seeing her eyes glaze over, seeing the blood dry, and seeing her basically the tone of her skin go pale. And it just doesn't just happen within seconds. It doesn't give you montage. You're literally there. You can either click on each word, because there is a jumble of words. It's the jumble of characters that are unintelligible that you can keep clicking on, or you can click on skip. But even if you click on skip, and I've done both, by the way, because you get an achievement if you click through all of them, if you don't skip. But even if you click on skip, it takes at least 2 minutes where you are seeing the time pass, seeing day turned to evening, turned to night, turned to morning, turned to day, until Monica and Natsuki comes back into the room. And I thought that was done really, really beautifully. And that is one of the most impactful moments for me, together with the Sayori's suicide. But for me, I think that was the most impactful moment. Not the actual Yuri killing herself, but the time afterwards until we meet Monica and Natsuki again. So I really wanted to kind of say it myself, but what about you? What about you, Stipple? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think you put it really well. Like, overall, the sentiment is the same. For me, it actually played out slightly differently. So this is kind of the interesting bit. So when we were sitting there and that happened, she kills herself, and then she's lying there on plopped up against one of the chairs in the classroom, and all the jumble comes up, and we sat there for like a good 5-10 seconds just kind of taking it in, and then I started skipping through the dialogue manually, and I realized, okay, this is just a jumble. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's gibberish.
Yeah.
And then I tried doing the skip, because I hadn't actually even used that functionality until that point. And it was going through the text, but then I noticed, okay, well, we've been at here like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
So then I stopped the skip, and I was like, what else can I do? Because, like, it's kind of like in any game, you're trying to like problem solve, trying to make your way out of the situation you're in. So I was like, what can I do? Okay, I went into the menu, and I was like looking through the menu, then looking at maybe if I load the game to a previous thing, maybe that's what they want me to do. So again, it did a great job of messing with your head. And I'm sure other people that have played the game had that kind of train of thought where they were like, okay, maybe if I exit the game and then go back in, maybe the game pushes you to a different time, or maybe you can save her somehow. That's kind of what was going through my head. So went out into the menu, loaded the game to the point, because there was an autosave right before.
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, that didn't do anything. That just brought me back to the start of when she's lying there. Right. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'll let it play out. But like that was a course of like 5-6 minutes where we were trying to kind of figure out what to do. And we were both like stumped. And then you realize, okay, if I leave it long enough, like there's some progression, and like you said, like her skin color changes and whatnot, so you can kind of notice. So I was like, okay, I'll leave it for a few minutes. Maybe that'll do it. And then obviously, that's exactly what did it. So it was interesting. Yeah, we had a different experience in a sense because of that. But it was impactful for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting because I would have thought, well, yeah, that's my experience. Surely everybody else had the same experience. Clearly not. And again, I think this is the strength of the gaming medium, that there are many ways of going about solving the problems that the game poses to you. And my approach is not necessarily the same as Stipple's approach, even though we have played exactly the same game and there is no other way of solving the issue, and yet we had slightly different experiences. But I just want to wrap that thought up with saying that I have never seen any other game out there, and I've played a lot of games, let me tell you, that does the passing of time, that did the passing of time and be passing of time be part of your experience and part of the story, as well as this moment in Doki Doki Literature Club. This is probably the best use of time I've ever seen in gaming, period. In my almost 30 years of computer gaming. Actually, 30 years.
Yeah, there's definitely other games that you play around with time like this.
But not as impactful. That's
in terms of the main narrative. Yeah, like I can give an example. Like just the one like off the top of my head. Yeah. There's a really cool one that I know. I haven't even finished the game. I played a little bit of it, but in Metal Gear Solid 3, and this is a very Kojima-esque thing to do, of course. There's a character, and I can't remember his name, but he's one of the bosses, and he's like a really old dude.
Okay.
So you can probably guess what happens, right?
Yeah.
So he's an old dude, and he's this sniper dude, I think. And what you can do is if you go in and you change the time and you advance the time by like X amount of years on your console.
Yep.
At the time, you could literally kill the guy and he's dead.
Yeah.
The time passing, and that was like there's such a cool. Like people still talk about that. So yeah, it was a really cool moment. But technically, you could say it's kind of part of the main story because he is one of the core bosses in the game. But yeah, it's a different. It's very cool, but it's very different. As well.
It's very different, but it kind of goes back to subverting people's expectations, right? And we have chats saying that they love that boss in Metal Gear Solid 3. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I agree that is a cool thing to do. But in terms of the story and the impact of the time passing in a story, I think no other game I've played. Maybe there are others, but no other game I've played was as good.
Totally. I mean, it's impossible to play every game these days.
Exactly.
When there's like 10,000 of them coming out every year.
Yeah. So after all this happens, we finally everything is revealed. Monica lets us know, of course, that she is indeed the one that is manipulating everything, and we will be spending some time with her. So what did you think of Monica referring to you by your real name?
That was one of my favorite parts of the game, honestly. Like, it was one of the most memorable and kind of shocking things. Because as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, I know how that's happening. Like, it wasn't like, oh my God, how does she know? Does she know me or something? No, I know I was reading your system name and from your computer. And
we all know that Stipple uses his real name as his login name. But yes, there we go.
But yeah, it was a great moment. Honestly, I didn't see that one coming.
I did not see that one coming, and the reason why I didn't see that one coming because Monica had a chat with my viewers as I was streaming.
Oh yeah, I know. I heard about this one. I've heard about this one.
So
that's really cool.
She gives you the whole spiel, and she's like, "I don't know who you are." Oh, it looks like you're streaming or recording. Yeah. Well, say hi to your viewers from me, will you? I hope they're doing well. And you're like, what? Yeah. So that was amazing. That is definitely one of the highlights of the game for me as well. And subverting these expectations much? Hell to the yays.
Yeah, honestly. And after I was going to ask you about that because, clearly you're going to bring it up naturally in conversation. Of
course.
I did read about it and I was like, oh, crap, that's so cool.
that was very cool. That's
so cool.
Wow. And it ties in, of course, to the, save hints and all the other things she's saying. And if you think back, you're like, hold up. Was she like sort of giving hints to everybody who is watching all the time? Which is, I thought it was really, really well done. And yeah, it's definitely the way it subverted my expectations. I did not expect that at all.
Yeah. It was very, very meta, like a lot of the kind of the themes and that in the game are. Yeah, yes. There's a meta narrative throughout, and the more you think about it, the more you kind of discover, I think.
Yeah. So it would not be a spoiler, or it will be a huge spoiler to say that, of course, Monica has gained sentience, and she is the only other real person in the whole game with you at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up sort of trapped. All of these save games are erased. All of your save files are gone. You cannot save or load the game. And every time you start the game, you are there with Monica in a room.
Yeah.
and she chats to you. And the longer you spend with her, the more conversations you have, the more you start getting to know her. And the more you understand her as a character or person. And the more you start realizing the main themes of the game, and we will come to the themes in a moment. But the question here is, how long did you, Stipple, spend with Monica?
Quite a long time, actually. We were sitting there for a while. And for one, it was like I was just curious to read more of the dialogue and what she was trying. And the more, you get a sense of like, she was completely obsessed with you, and she loves you. And you get more of that as kind of you hear more of the dialogue, and it becomes very kind of, very creepy. And there's so many lines.
It's interesting that you say it becomes very creepy, because I actually thought of it in a completely different sense. In the beginning, it seems very creepy, but the longer you spend with her, the more you start realizing that it's actually not creepy at all. It's very tragic. So it's interesting how your perception is different to mine on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone experiences things in a different way, and I actually the side stories were really good at delving deeper into that idea of how different perspectives, and you have to kind of be able to hear what someone says and not to raise up your walls or defenses and say, oh no, I don't agree with that. And I think there's some interesting ideas there, but going back to Monica herself,
So how long did you spend with her? I mean, if you were to kind of give an approximate
a long
time,
like a good 8 to 10 minutes, I'd say. We're just like going through the dialogue.
Oh, okay.
Just slowly, like I was just kind of and then I was like, this doesn't seem to be ending. There's clearly something I have to do. And then it kind of dawned on actually, it was funny because it was my partner first that kind of said, oh, maybe because she does say something about her file. Like at some point, I can't remember the exact line, but
so what she says first was that she has erased the characters' files. After all, it was so easy there in the character file folder.
Yeah.
And then if you keep just sitting with her, she says, well, I hope, nothing like this would happen to me, and that my file won't be erased. Which is like clear hint from the developer saying, this is how you progress the game.
Yeah.
But this could be like an ending in its own right. You could say that this is a Monica's ending, even though it's not, and we'll get into that in a little while.
That's true, because you could literally leave it play, and I mean, eventually you'll run out of lines. But I was kind of interested to see what else you would say.
I believe there are 50 different lines that are presented to you randomly. So she has 50 different dialogues, and not just lines, but 50 different dialogue starts.
Yes.
So there are a lot. You can spend a lot of time with her. I spent a little bit more time with her. I think so. I've ended one of the streams, and I was kept just going and going and going through the dialogue with her. And people are like, "Well, you've reached the true ending," and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting." But then I would log in, and I logged in off stream, and she would still talk, and I'm like, "Huh, that is really cool." And then I logged in onto another stream, and she would still talk, and I'm like, right, I'm really interested to hear everything she has to say, but I actually have to proceed with the game. So I think I might have spent on stream and off stream together maybe 40-ish minutes to maybe closer to 50 minutes. Just spending time with her, and I still haven't seen all of her dialogue, which is pretty amazing, to be honest. And I was taking my time. I wasn't like scrolling through the dialogue or anything like that.
Yeah, but there's a lot there, and it was kind of interesting because it really broke it, like completely broke through the fourth wall. And
Totally.
She was talking about you and her, and just like getting kind of deeper on a kind of psychological level of like the human condition and things like that. Yes. So it was very interesting to kind of hear her talk about that stuff.
And the longer you sit with her, and that's why I said that the longer you kind of realize it's tragic, but the longer you sit with her, the more you realize the themes of the game, which we'll dive into in a second. But after everything is said and done, of course, if you have played the game, you know that you delete Monica and you restart the game, and everything seems to be hunky-dory. Everyone seemed to be happy. And then the person who takes the mantle of the Doki Doki Literature Club president gains sentience. In this instance, it was Sayori. And Sayori decides that she wants to spend all the time with you. And we realize that Monica hasn't actually gone. And the real tragedy of the situation actually shines through there. And we get the real end. Well, we get the ending, right? And this is what a lot of people call the real ending, the true ending. But a lot of people say, well, the good ending is the true ending. So I don't know. I don't know which one is which. But we get Monica's son. And I think that was another, and I'll go first here, and you can contribute afterwards. I think this was another very powerful moment for me. I literally got teary-eyed, and yes, you can watch it on stream if you want to. When you realize what's actually like, what has happened, and then you realize as the sun goes on, as the titles scroll by, that Monica is deleting everything. And you realize that there is nothing you can do. Even if you delete Monica, she's still there, she's still self-aware. And that's just, that is the tragedy of the situation, until it looks like she deletes herself and deletes the whole game. And then this is, some people say, the true ending. So what were your thoughts on that? And how much of an impact had this Monica's son on you? Because as I said, I just got teary-eyed. Like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Much stronger than Sayori's suicide or Yuri's Yuri's suicide. So
yeah. I'd say I didn't have as strong an emotional reaction to it, but at the same time, it was very poignant. And the best part about it was that it was the first time in the entire game that you actually heard a voice.
Yes.
And it happened to be a song and it was Monica playing the piano, because you get, it's alluded throughout the game where she's late to the meetings that she's practicing piano.
Exactly, yeah.
And that was really cool. And then she actually plays for you, and you're like, oh my god, well, this is literally her like completely like opening up and confessing all of her feelings. And eventually, like if you look at the lyrics of the song, it's like she realizes that it'll never be reality because she's a program and you're a real person.
Yeah.
So it is tragic, like you said. Overall, her story is very tragic, and it was an amazing moment. And it's like, I can't believe it was kind of like it really reminded me of Portal. So the first Portal, and
there is no cake.
GLaDOS. Yeah, GLaDOS sings to you at the end, and I feel like it was inspired by that ending. Yeah, as well.
Yeah. I think so as well, but it has a tremendous impact on me. So since we're on the stories, and this is the last kind of bit we're going to talk about, what are your thoughts on side stories? Because your thoughts on side stories are not completely, but a little bit different to mine. So let's have you explain to us why you like side stories, because you have alluded already that you like them. And what are your thoughts overall on them? And then I'll give my 2 cents on that.
Yep. I thought they were really good at a few things. and that was fleshing out the relationships between all the characters, because really when you look at them and all the various parts, there's what, like trust, respect, balance, reflection, and self-love, I believe.
Trust,
the main ones.
understanding, respect, balance, reflection, self-love, and equals at the very end.
Yeah, exactly. So, and each one of those delves into the various relationships between usually two of the characters, but sometimes more are introduced. And I really enjoyed them because they, like I said, they fleshed the relationships out. And in my case, I felt that they developed the characters more, but I do realize that some of that has to do with me not experiencing all of the stories within the base game because of the way I played it.
Yeah.
But even saying that, I actually do feel that I liked the decision to have it as a prequel. So like before the main, so they're removing the main character because when we find out that the main character is actually irrelevant, completely irrelevant, which is great. Actually, I love that plot point, because it's like when you realize that that you don't need to have them at all.
Yes,
and it's even clearer when the side stories were added in with Plus, that it was all about the four main girls in the game, and getting to know them and their relationships, and the kind of the prequel nature of it being like, how did they get to know each other? And that was interesting to me. There's quite a lot there, and I think I mentioned it earlier with a couple of Yuri's lines where she was talking about her like anxiety or like her being uncomfortable around groups and just liking her own time.
Yeah.
Then Sayori really getting her time to shine in terms of like, again, being that mediator that I mentioned, and like the glue and keeping trying her best to keep everyone happy, because deep inside she isn't necessarily with herself, and she's battling depression the whole time.
Yeah,
and she's trying to make everybody else happier. And even Monica gets a bit more time. At least the version of Monica. So from my perspective, I think that this is trying to say that this is either an alternate version, or like a different reality, or else it is it is part of the same thing, but it's before whatever infected Monica and to become her sentient self. Because Monica seems to be acting very naturally, and it's kind of supposed to be like separate from the main narrative, from my understanding.
One theory is that player booting up the game and starting the game and being present as a character is what triggers Monica to gain self consciousness and sentience. So it almost looks like once you're removed from the equation, at least that's my thoughts as well. Once you're removed from the equation and side stories, they seem to be quite happily interacting with each other, etc. This is, of course, if we're thinking of it in a very meta way, right?
Yeah. But no, I think that's the brilliance of the game.
Yeah.
There's so many layers to it that you can have an interpretation and that's different to someone else's, and you can argue, as long as you can argue a point and say, okay, I think that because of these reasons, you can kind of come to a conclusion and say, well, this is what I got out of it, and this is my thinking. But
absolutely,
it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think it's all completely subjective, which is, I think, the most interesting part about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt that some characters were more developed. Like, I think I liked Natsuki more.
Yes.
In the side stories, honestly. And I think she really got her time to shine. And you got more depth, so much more depth than what I had seen in the base game.
Yes. So I kind of, with Natsuki, I agree to an extent. There are a few bits here and there that were not in the main game with Natsuki. And I think she is the one that you probably learn a little bit more about than anybody else if you 100%ed the game yourself, right? So, do you have any other kind of thoughts on that? Because I will give my thoughts now. If you don't, I'll move on with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting themes within that they tried to cover within the and I think the headings really explain it quite well.
Yes.
So for example, like what was I thinking before? Like them getting along with each other, like specifically Yuri and Natsuki. They were kind of discovering, they were kind of building on top of themselves and trying to kind of work in terms of their emotionality. Because both of them were emotional in different ways. Like there's a really cool scene in it where Natsuki's talking about manga, and you know that she does manga from the base game. But
yes.
Here they kind of delve into it more, where it's like, well, how about Monica actually mediates, and how about Natsuki and Yuri kind of say what they actually feel, and without having to hold back, like as be kind of nice as much as you can. But it's funny because what happens is, and it's funny because I have examples in my own life, and I think a lot of these different stories that they tell in the side stories, kind of I could kind of think of situations in my own life where I was like, oh yeah, that happens, and there's a lot of miscommunication, and someone blurts something out and they say a word and it's misinterpreted by the other person, and it becomes this kind of argument. And I think it did a really great job of capturing that, because clearly, again, Dan's taking all of this from his own life experiences, and it's very clear because I've had experiences like that in my own life, and I
think I know exactly what you're talking about as well, because I think maybe all of us, if you're older than 10, would have had similar experiences, or well, let's say adults.
Yeah. But and there's that level of maturity, which again, I think there's a little bit of what do you call it, like a dissonance with a lot of the themes in the game and the age of the characters, which we mentioned before, where it's like the emotional maturity of some of the characters and some of the things they talk about specifically is way above their years. Like you're talking like someone that's clearly more like in their 30s at least, or older. And they've had that life experience, and they're able to talk about these things, and empathy, and having understanding how someone might feel when you say something or you act a certain way, and it's way above their years, and that's where I'm. There's always in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, these guys, they're 18 and over 18. Yeah, I get that, but
they're not 18.
There's a well, yeah, it's like some of them don't even look 18 younger, but then at the same time, mentally, some of them are like way more mature, and some of the things they talk about even between themselves, I'm like, sometimes you don't even have those conversations as an adult, so it's like, like when you're way older. So that's what really resonated with me, and that's why I liked the short stories overall.
That's really, really, really good points. As for me, so I thought that the side stories, they were nice. They definitely allowed us to get a glimpse of the relationship building between the characters. However, my biggest disappointment with the side stories was that we were retreading the same ground, a lot of the same ground, with Yuri, and to a certain extent with Natsuki and Sayori as well. Because all these themes were covered in the main game. Most of these themes were covered in the main game. Let me rephrase that.
I wouldn't say all of them, but yeah, some of them, like even in the isn't the tagline, or not the tagline, one of the things about the literature club itself, they have values in the base game, and I think it's like trust, respect, and is it one other one? I can't remember.
But yeah.
So some of them are directly, and at the very end of the side stories, they write them all on the board.
Yes.
And it kind of harkens back to how you find yourself at the very beginning of the base game, and you're like introduced to it and the values of the literature club. So that was really cool. But anyway, sorry, that was
and you do. And the thing is that the side stories, in my opinion, they are fully optional content, and there is a reason why they were set apart from the game. And while it gives you appreciation for the characters a bit more, in certain instances, like Yuri, for example, a lot of her themes were just being rehashed again and again, and I started getting bored. I think trust and understanding, the first two stories were fantastic. And then respect, balance, and reflection is where the stories, in my opinion, went down, because it was rehashing it was retreading the same ground a lot. Even though it was building the relationship between the characters themselves weren't growing at all. And then the last two ones, the self-love and equals, were done really, really well. And the whole kind of equals part that you only unlock if you have completed the good ending in the game and done all of the side stories is a true good ending, because everybody lives happily ever after in there. And what makes me think that this might not actually be in the same even universe as the main game, all right? Because it's idyllic, and it almost doesn't correspond to the state you find the club in when the main character is introduced. Because the state you leave the club in side stories, which is allegedly a prequel, is everybody appreciates everyone, everybody accepts everybody's likes, dislikes, and characters. And by characters, I mean, of course, their personalities. And everybody is in harmony. While when you actually join the club as a character in the main game, that is not the case. The people still don't think Sayori's manga is real literature, and all these little things that we of course find out through the main story. So, and that's why I think the side stories are definitely their fantastic addition, but they could have been better, in my opinion, because you find all these themes, most of these themes out in the main game already, especially as regards to Yuri. And because Yuri was my favorite character, that was where I was the most disappointed. That was definitely a dip for me in my experience of the game. And in a way, I would have wanted it to be directly connected to the main game, instead of this idyllic representation of the club. But it was nice at the same time to have this happy family at the very end, where everybody lived happily ever after. So, yeah. That's my thoughts on the side stories.
I think they're connected in a way that is more interesting than if it was actually directly tied into the main plot, I think. And the reason
I agree with you on that, yes.
Is that I was thinking about it this morning, and like in lying in bed. But because if you see, like you mentioned the word harmony, and I thought that was a really good word.
Yes.
So I'm going to use harmony as the side stories. So this is like your utopian version of the club, and it's not perfect. Don't get me wrong; it's definitely not perfect. But
no,
but they're really trying their hardest to make it this kind of place where everybody's happy and everybody can kind of understand each other. Understanding is a big thing.
Yeah.
And have empathy for each other. While the base game is more disorder, and it's messy, and it's infected by this virus, essentially.
In a way, I would say it's real life instead of utopia that is presented in the side stories.
I wouldn't go that far, because I don't think the side stories were perfect. They're also imperfect, because they do still argue and they squabble and they do things that you would do in real life too.
Correct, but everything is always resolved in the very harmonic way.
Yeah, true. But yeah, I see it as a yin and yang kind of as well, where it's like one is the darker and then this is the light. And I think that's what he was going for. He was trying to add this kind of the nicer, the best ending, the most wholesome ending and wholesome stories. But at the same time, they were still trying to overcome their differences and gaining that compassion for each other that they didn't have an opportunity to do in the base game because it was so chaotic. And so again, like it was corrupted by the Monica and her will
Yeah.
over everything else. So yeah, I actually, I think there's quite a lot in there, and it's quite interesting how they introduced them in Plus. So yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
No, that's all good points. Actually, that brings us very, very well to our next topic, which are the themes of the game. So initially, I wanted to ask you what do you think are the themes, but I will, in order to save time, because as always, we're going over time. Let's talk about the themes. So, of course, the main themes of the game, as far as I can see, and you can add to them. One of the main things for me is mental health.
Yes.
And mental health issues specifically. They're tackled in two different ways in side stories and in the main game, but they are present throughout. And we'll go into that in a second, in that. The second theme is the creativity and expressing yourself through your creativity. In the game, it is through the poems that the characters have expressed themselves, and that you can really show your true self through the poems. That was the second theme. The third theme, as far as I can see, of course, is the AI, an exploration. What is an AI, and how will we ever know if something has gained sentience unless they do something as drastic as what Monica does? And of course, not only that was kind of a secondary part of the AI theme, but the main part was, is it right for us to try an experiment and bring something forth as an AI and treat it as just another program when that program we can gain sentience? Now, I have to preface that with the fact that GPT, whatever number right now is the latest one, 4.0, is
probably 4.5 or something.
Yeah, it's not the real true AI. It does not have sentience, and it is very, very far from getting there. However, it is much closer to the GAI, or general AI, artificial intelligence, that we have ever been in our entire life. And if we apply Turing tests to it, the Turing test is no longer adequate to gauge. And I actually have talked about this in one of my streams, that we have always been pushing our understanding what is true artificial intelligence is, the further down the road, the more advances we made. And we always said this is not the true artificial intelligence. And we are here where AI can write you a book, compose a poem, make a video, or draw a picture. And if you don't know any better, you wouldn't be able to distinguish if it is indeed written by AI or a true human, or composed by AI, or whatever, painted by AI or a true human. So, and yet we still say that is not a real true sentience, because of course our understanding deepens. But at what point are we just saying that without actually thinking, well, maybe there is true sentience there? But anyway, that is besides the point. That is completely different conversation we can dive into on another Game Talk Meow podcast. But these are the themes, as far as I understand, of the game, and kind of a letter from the dev later on. We will read the letter, kind of confirms that as well. But are there any other themes that you thought the game tackles?
Yeah, interesting, because I'd 100% agree with the first two, and I saw those. When you started talking about AI and that side of things, I actually thought that the game didn't delve into that topic heavily at all. I wouldn't say it was one of the core themes. It
delved into it indirectly, though.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I wouldn't say it was one of the core themes. I'd say you could argue it was a sub-theme.
I just realized something. You have not 100%ed the game, did you not? I'm being completely serious here.
You're being that guy,
I gonna
like,
bring
you didn't play the
something
game.
up. I'm gonna bring something up on the screen right now. Display capture. There we go. Let's put display capture up ahead. Okay. Right.
But yeah,
Can you see the game screen?
I don't know. One sec. Oh, okay. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So see all these emails.
Mm-hmm.
They are literally directly talking about AI.
Right.
So every single one of them talks about AI and developing, and how Monica is gaining sentience, and how this is like super weird and we have to contain it and things like that. Right? So I just wanted to put it out there that
no, that's really cool.
Actually,
I should read those emails.
Yeah.
But I do. Weren't those added in Plus?
Those were added in Plus, yes. So, but since we're talking about Plus, let's talk about themes in Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. But yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, so the AI one, I still think it's a sub theme because it wasn't in the original. And he later decided that he wanted to develop that, so that was an additional thing. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting perspective, because I didn't get that feeling from my experience of it. But then there's a couple that I think that I kind of thought about. That one of them is love. There was a very strong and under that, you're talking like, compassion, empathy, understanding, like some of the themes that are actually touched in the side stories, but also in the base game. And I think that's quite an important one, just because of how interpersonal and how it all deals with relationships in the game. Because it's all about them trying to get along, trying to understand each other, and a lot of that is around the idea of, like, not love in terms of, like, just like platonic love, and that's kind of what I mean, where it's like showing love to somebody else and listening to somebody else and things like that. Those ideas were very much core to the experience. And then another one was I would say is more of a social commentary. So one of the themes is a social commentary on...
Actually, if I may, Innisfree, thank you so much for the comment. Just commented saying that could a tertiary theme be commentary on the dating sims, for example, player relationship with in-game characters? So
that's my main. I think it's one of the main themes. Actually, I wouldn't say it's a tertiary theme at all. We'll get to the letter that Dan wrote as well, but I think that ties into it, where it definitely is a commentary on dating sims, and the reason that why this was created was because it wanted to do something different, and it wanted people to think about why they were playing these games and the relationships they were having with the characters, and why were they kind of turning to these games, and why did they enjoy forming those relationships potentially. So yeah, I think that was definitely one of the key themes, I would say. Even
one of the key themes. Interesting. I have a question for you that is not on our agenda. Have you watched the Sacred Symbols podcast about Doki Doki Literature Club?
I have, yes.
You have, right? Okay, that's all I wanted to ask. The reason why I'm asking is because that definitely, in my opinion, they have missed a train. They have not understood quite a lot of the game, which I found very surprising. But at the same time, this is what they were positing was the main theme of the game. And while I agree that that is a theme, I do not think that that is the main theme of the game.
Yeah, well, I never said it was the main theme. That's
well, you did mention that this is one of the main themes. So
yeah, but there's many themes.
There are many themes in the game, absolutely. And for me, actually, for me, the main theme of the game, in my opinion, is the mental health issues. And it's not the mental health issues in general, but specifically the how to handle and deal with mental health issues. And as you were saying, kind of in terms of showing off love and understanding. And that, in my opinion, that is the main theme of the game. But shall we circle back and talk about, first and foremost, about expressing yourself through poems and creativity? Because that was the first thing that the game actually goes into, and the first theme of the game. And then we'll kind of go in order and tackle the rest of them.
Okay.
Right, so what did you think of that? What are kind of your thoughts about how did the game handle that? And not only how the game handled it, but also what are the messages that you took away from that?
The poems?
Just expressing yourself through creativity, because that was one of the themes.
I
did not think about it, and that's okay.
Well, no.
You did, right? Okay.
I did, but I don't think that you express yourself through the poems. I actually don't think you do that, because your agency with how you interact with creating the poems is very, very limited. And you get given a set of words that you select, and they relate to the characters based on what they are defined as within the game. But you're not actually there is no output of the words that you're creating other than the relationships that you're engaging in. So you're like, I'm going to pick this word because it kind of sounds like this character. And then sometimes words can be like, you're not sure because some characters have common personality traits is the way I'd put it.
I think Sayori was the hardest one to pick for because she is bittersweet as described by the game. And she loves both cute things, sweet things, and she's depressed. Sad things, basic. Well, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But actually, since we're talking about, you're kind of going more into the mechanics here. So since we're talking about mechanics, let's dive into that for a second. Can I just ask you? Throughout this conversation, you were from the very beginning. You're like, I was paying attention. I was looking out for these small things in the game. How the hell did you manage to write 3 poems and not realize the feedback the game is giving you for what words to choose for what girl? The little chibi characters jumping up and down saying, I like this word.
Yeah, I think it was... we were sitting on the couch and playing it, and we were like, we just saw we were playing on the TV and we saw the words, and we were really fixated on the words. Like our focus was like completely on the words that we missed what was going on the other page. Because like when you think about it, it's like on the left hand side at the very bottom you have the chibis. If they were placed in a different, maybe like at the top or something, I think we might have noticed them more. But because they're kind of like further away from the text, and we were really fixated on the text, and we're like, oh, what words are we going to pick? And we're writing a poem, and like what do we want to evoke from this poem? But some of the words were random, and we were like, I don't really know, maybe just throw this one in and that one in, and we weren't making any sense of it. So that was kind of funny, because then later obviously you realize that you're selecting the words because you're selecting them to match certain characters, the 3 characters that you can have relationships with.
And I feel that is one of the weaknesses of the game as well. And again, since we're not just talking about themes here, but about the mechanics, is that I expected to actually read the poem that we have written when we are sharing the poems with the characters. and you never did.
Yeah, I was actually. We were both quite disappointed.
I was really disappointed when I
actually.
first realized that wasn't happening.
Yeah,
very
because
similar to you.
It kind of ties into like some of the elements that the game is doing, like where it's when you realize you don't really have that much agency over your decisions, like when you're trying to like save, once you know, when you're trying to figure out a way to save like Sayori or Yuri, you realize that there is no saving them because the game is coded, and Monica is making sure that the game is coded against you, that you can't do that. And it removes that agency and the power that you have over your control is kind of removed. And I think,
yes.
I guess you could argue that's tied with the system and the mechanics of the creation of poems, that like you think that you have the power, but in reality you lack that power, and it doesn't actually translate to anything. Even though it does translate into like you're selecting characters, and you're like, it's an interesting mechanic, and it kind of ties into that theme, but I don't know if it works 100%. And I think we kind of felt similarly about that.
I thought that, so me having streamed it on Twitch, of course, and having to read everything, the interesting thing that I found, at first I was very disappointed with it, but the interesting thing that I found is that if you tailor the words for specific characters, because I was voicing over everything, I would voice over the words. And I found that the words, actually, when you pick them for specific character, they create a certain story. Not necessarily 100% the one that makes sense, but the one that could actually be considered very poetic. And I thought that was very interesting. And you can go and kind of check out the videos, and you will see me like saying one word and the other word and the third word, and you're like, actually, that kind of rhymes. That kind of sounds very, very nice. That kind of makes sense when you put these words together. It's almost like writing a story. It's not quite a story, but it's like a proto story, right? That is emerging, a proto poem, if you'd like, which I thought tied into the whole theme of expressing yourself really nicely. But I'm still disappointed that you did not see a full poem after you have chosen the words. So
yeah, definitely. And actually, so I think what you were asking me about earlier in terms of the themes expressing yourself, you're talking about the characters expressing yourself, not the player.
Yes, so
right?
Exactly. So I wasn't talking about the mechanical part. I was talking about, because the theme was, by doing something creative in the game, it is poems, but it applies generally, that this is the only true way to express yourself. Right? So whether it is be painting, music composing, writing a book, or poems, or whatever it might be, creating videos, etc.
Yeah,
etc.
Art as a form of expression.
Art as a form of expression, which, while I don't think it's the strongest theme of the game, I still think it's one of the underlying themes that runs throughout the game.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part about this game. You can argue that there's so many different themes and sub-themes, and you can probably make an argument for all the ones we mentioned earlier. You could make an argument for them. But yeah, I think the creativity angle is like, they outright, some of the characters, I think Yuri and Sayori outright say at points within the base game and the side stories, where they say that I find it easier to write something down on paper and hand it to you versus saying it out loud, because it's more difficult to do it that way and in person. Yeah. So, and I think it kind of translates to, even if we look at it like in our own lives, like sending a message on text in text format is much easier than picking up the phone or calling someone and or like meeting them face to face. You're slightly more disconnected.
Yes, it's more impersonal, so it's easier to maybe say things that you might not know how to say properly during the face-to-face conversation, or we can say we're talking face-to-face even though you're in a different country to where I am right now. So yeah.
But yeah, no, I do think that's an interesting thing to discuss. Like, it is one of the themes, one of the many themes.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I did think about it.
For me, I suppose it stands out more in my mind because, of course, I am trying to create something when you're making videos and even entertaining people on Twitch. A lot of people think, well, streaming is just playing the game by yourself and letting others see what you're doing. But actually, a lot of it is entertaining people who are watching you. I'm not saying that I'm the best at it. I think that I do have my moments, but a lot of it is putting yourself out there and actually expressing things that you want to express through the medium of either streaming. And it's a little bit more artistic, of course, when you're trying to create a video for something that you're put a lot of thought into in terms of editing, etc., and things like that. So that's why I thought that this was quite a strong theme, or at least the very first theme that we encounter in the game. But I think we've kind of covered that enough, unless you have something else to add, and we can move on to the mental health issues. And in my opinion, the game covers mental health not only extensively and different aspects over it, because every character has their own mental health issues here, but also in a very mature and a very, I want to say, not over the top gamey way, where it's like, it's so obvious, but more in a more respectful manner, if that makes sense.
I think so. Yeah. I think it's the way the game is presented, because in terms of the mechanics, which we'll cover, there's very few, and you're limited there. So the way it kind of communicates and expresses the whole mental health issues is literally by talking. And if you think about it, what's recommended to people that are suffering from mental health? To talk to a professional. Like that's one of the main things that everybody says, because you can talk to a friend or something, but sometimes you can't express everything with someone that's close to you. So you need to go outside of that and talk to someone that maybe knows more about the topic and kind of can delve. And I've spoken to many people that have similar issues. And I think it handles it overall, I think, really well throughout the entire game. And I think it really does a great job of that kind of that love theme that I was talking about, and all the sub themes underneath it in the side stories, where you really get a sense of, like, where it's almost like therapy for the characters, like as they're talking to each other and they're discussing all these various topics and issues. They have interpersonal issues, and I don't agree with you, I don't agree with this, and or talking about something deeper, like, I'm at some point they do actually say, I'm depressed, or like Yuri does in the side stories. And while it is a theme that's already covered in the base game, I think I see the side stories as more therapeutic and more kind of positive thinking, and trying to work through the problems. And that's what I really liked about it. And I think that one of the many reasons why I like the side stories. But I think they covered the mental health side extremely well.
Yeah. And I agree with you totally on that. But I also think that the main game carries mental health really, really well as well. More in a the darker side of it, rather than the it's a therapy. But
it's almost like a warning. It's almost like this is how bad it can get.
And I want to say that I wouldn't have been able to appreciate. I don't think I would have been able to appreciate this game to its fullest extent if I myself did not have mental health issues. And not only that, but if I myself did not have to see others' mental kind of health problems. right? So I've both experienced it myself, and I experienced it from the point of view of taking care of somebody. And I think for yourself, you definitely have experienced the latter. And I'm not sure if you're happy to talk about yourself here in terms of have you ever had mental health issues, etc. But as for me, I have, and I was really open about it when I was playing the game, that I have had gone through a pretty severe depression, burnout first and then depression afterwards for about half a year or so. And I have not been the same since. And that made me more aware, if you'd like, of themes. I want to say themes, but of other people experiencing that. And of course, the way the game is structured is about other characters that are going through that. And maybe that is the reason why I was able to pick up on Sayori's depression almost immediately. It's like all the signs point that she's depressed because of this, and this. And in a way, I would like to say that the theme of the game was almost therapeutic for me, that it handled these issues in a very respectful manner, but in a very safe environment as well. And I think that's very important to indicate here. And it allowed me to kind of see things from different perspective. And also, which is very, very important, I think, because I was streaming it, share this experience with other people who are watching, who quite a few of them have gone through mental health issues themselves. And that was almost, as I said, therapeutic for me. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Yeah. Yeah. And I would probably say that the game came at a perfect time in my life for me to be able to appreciate it fully.
Yeah, actually, just on the last thing you said, I think same for me. I picked up on the themes pretty quickly, and playing it at this time in the last, I think if I played it 5 years ago, even, I think I would have, like when it came out initially, I probably wouldn't have understood, or at least have found it as impactful as I would now, especially around that mental health theme. So I think for some people it mightn't resonate as much, but for me personally, and for you, it definitely did. So I think and I think we've already said that they did a great job. They did a great job. And the writer, he did a fantastic job bringing it all together and making it like a cohesive whole, where it never felt like it was like beating you over the head with something. It was just very like compassionate and neutral in the way that it was told.
Absolutely. No, I think we're both in agreement on that. And the reason why, and I think it's interesting that you're saying that you might not have been able to appreciate it in about 5 years. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up as well is because going back to the Sacred Symbols podcast, talking about the Doki Doki Literature Club, they have not even brought up that as any type of theme of the game, which both myself and my partner found very shocking. And then we kind of thought about it and realized, well, if the people never experienced it either themselves or had to live with other people experience it, kind of other family members having to go through it and experience it, you wouldn't even maybe notice or think that these themes are important and kind of glance over them, which I felt happened in that podcast. But of course, we're not really talking about the podcast specifically, but about the game.
Or someone could kind of say that, I understand that's one of the themes, but they can't really talk about it, and maybe that's why they decide to not go deeper, because they can't really talk about it in any kind of meaningful way, other than to say, oh, well, that they had mental health themes here, and that's kind of all I can say. And I think us being able having more experiences around that topic means that we can go in more depth and from my own personal experiences, but also from a kind of a greater kind of bird's eye view of like, this is what they were trying to achieve here.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, this is not about, talking about mental health issues specifically. Maybe we can do a different podcast about that. This is mental health issues as regarding to the game Doki Doki Literature Club and the themes therein. So my last point was being the AI and the real tragedy of Monica, but clearly you didn't think this was the biggest theme of the game, but I think it was the big theme of the game. And the point is that the Monica, because we're talking about specific Monica here, is the only other quote-unquote person in the game. And she is going insane because everybody else is on the rails and not a real person.
Mm-hmm.
And you are the outlet for her, the only first, quote-unquote first, real person that she can actually relate to and talk to. So even though throughout the game, at first you think she's super evil because she's killing everyone, well, she's just deleting files on the computer. And actually, Innisfree is just saying regarding our earlier conversation that I guess that's also why some people found the trigger warnings annoying and unnecessary. And that is, of course, relating to the mental health issues if you've never had any mental health issues or maybe never have witnessed a suicide or anything like that.
Or you find them annoying, but you appreciate that they're there and you understand why they're there, which is kind of my perspective. Where like I did find them annoying, but at the same time, I understand why they're there. So for myself, I was like, I don't need this, but I can see why other people might need it, especially because of the context of how it's presented.
And just for the record, I did not find them annoying. I did not need them myself. But I did not find them annoying, and I understand why they're there, and I think it's a good thing that they're there. But anyway, I think Innisfree is referring to the Sacred Symbols podcast because they went really into depth on that one. But anyway, about the annoyance of the warnings. But yeah, AI and Monica being a real person and going absolutely insane. And really leading to all these escapades that we have experienced. In my opinion, I think this was done well. I know that you're saying, well, actually, it's not in the main game. Even though it's quite clearly in the main game, but the deeper descriptions, the emails, are only in Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. Not in Doki Doki Literature Club, the original.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, and it's in there now, so you can talk about it as it is now, and this is the package. And clearly Dan thought it was a good idea to put them in for a thematic or narrative reason. So, yeah, I think it's worth discussing for sure.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I think I've pretty much kind of surmised my thoughts on that topic, that it was handled well, and really, Monica is... If you go by the, what is happening, she's the only real person there, and it's a tragedy that she literally cannot escape. She's just trapped with these on the rails, two-dimensional characters.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've discussed it at length, so I don't want to say too much, but yeah, I thought that, like it was like initially it was creepy when you discover that she just fawned and loved you and wanted to make a connection with someone, and that's that's the human element of it. So because she had gained sentience, she was starting to have some of those human attributes that she desired, love. And again, going back to that theme, and she wanted something more than the programming, the code that was what the rest of the characters were built, because they're very inflexible in that one sense. And yeah, she could control them and she could make them do things, but she didn't want that. She wanted a real connection to someone, and someone that would respond to her and not bend to her will.
Exactly.
so it is, yeah, no, it's great. Like, I thought she was a fantastic character, and yeah, definitely at the core of the game.
Yeah, no.
And in that sense, but maybe not the great, like, yeah, I didn't necessarily think about the greater implications of AI, but within the smaller scale, kind of human element, that's kind of what I was thinking of.
And that's kind of what the game was really pushing, the human element of AI. So, but that brings us kind of to the mechanics. We've covered mechanics in terms of poem writing a little bit, and I think we both agree that it could have been better. What do you think? So there are some decision making that you have to do, and they're kind of put in my opinion, in the most inappropriate moments. You kind of get into the lull of things with the game, and then you're faced with this decision when you least expect it, which is a good thing, again, in my opinion. But what were your thoughts on that? There are only a couple of decisions you make throughout the game, and arguably, as you pointed out, they really don't matter. But you still make them, and they still make a difference.
Yeah, well, the first one that comes to mind is when Sayori kind of confesses her love for you, and she's like, "Oh, I love you," and all this kind of stuff.
The first big one.
You have the choice. Yeah, and then you have the choice to say, "I love you" back, or you kind of say, "I'd rather keep our relationship as a friendly one, a friendship only, platonic relationship." So, and then you realize, yeah, no, like I picked the platonic one.
Yes,
because I was like, I don't feel comfortable, and actually I was sitting there with my partner, and we were both kind of like, I don't feel comfortable saying that just for the sake of saying it, because that's what it felt like, because she was expressing her love, and
just because your partner was next to you, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, if I say yes, then it's over.
That's it. It's game over. You're in love with the character in the game.
I have to accept my my new digital relationship.
That's it.
And forgo my my physical human relationship. But yeah, that was one where you're like, okay, well, it was so early that it felt wrong to say, oh yeah, I love you back. Oh my God, So, but it was a decision. You had to make it. And then we felt terrible. Like, we actually felt so bad, the two of us. And we were like, oh no, maybe we should have picked the other one just to make her feel better. But that's kind of part of the experience, where they wanted you to feel something by making the decision so early on. And then you feel bad because of what Sarah does next, which is she falls on the ground on her knees and she begs you and she says, oh, but and she got really upset, and you're like trying to comfort her, but you've already said, well, you made your decision and it feels final. And like that was like, that definitely got a reaction out of us for sure.
It's interesting because I have chosen the opposite. I am like, this is a pivotal moment, and because this is a pivotal moment, I know that she's experiencing depression. She's like, it looks like she's starting to spiral. I cannot say no. So I have to make sure that she doesn't kill herself. Because at that stage I was already thinking, oh my God, this is like, I can see where this might be going. So I'm like, right, I think we're gonna say we love her. And it flips, and she feels more hollow than she has ever before. Because I don't think you've experienced that.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't.
She's basically, she says something to the effect of, "Oh, I would like to, like, this is the happiest day of my life. So why do I feel nothing inside at all?"
Right.
And you're like, "Oh crap."
Well, yeah, there is no right decision.
There is no right decision. That brings us back to what you were saying earlier.
It's that you feel. Yeah, evokes an emotion within you.
Yes,
and it's negative, and that's what the point of that scene is. It's like, whatever choice you make, she's going to feel a certain way. And also, it's Monica messing with her programming as well. It's she's making it so that she's feeling those Sayori's feeling those emotions more intensely than she would have.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
which
it's interesting. Yeah, it all ties in. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that was done really well, and I like the way that the decisions popped up. You're like you're just lulled into just clicking next, and all of a sudden this decision comes up, and you're like, oh, God damn it, I hate you, game. Even when it was like a dating decision where you choose who you spend the time with, crafting, getting ready for the festival and things like that. So I thought that was well done. They appear in the inappropriate times in the best of fashion. We have already covered Monica's chat with a player, so how the game hooks into scraping your system for the details of your name and or what programs are running to detect if you're streaming the game or not. And I thought that was really, really well done. So what else? Right. The main mechanics of the game, though, is manipulation of files. So I gotta point something out, and this is not necessarily immediately obvious if you're just playing the game, but when you come out of the game, and if you save, then you come out, and you decide to look into the files, because since I have 100% completion, as the story progresses, there are various notes left in the file that give you huge hints as to what is going on. And it is really sad and many times really scary as well. And that is the only way to actually find those details because they never appear in the game. And the only way is to go to the files at a specific time and have a look because later on they disappear. Which I thought is very interesting, and I thought it is a very clever mechanic of telling the story only to those people who are savvy enough to notice that.
Yeah.
After you're specifically told to delete pretty much Monica, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So go ahead.
Yeah, the way you get and the way you get one of the quick endings is by knowing that you have to delete Monica. So you do that initially, but then you're like, what if I go in there and I delete Monica straight away before I even start the game? So because that was like one of the first thoughts I had.
Yes.
And that brings you into the ending where
Easter egg ending.
Because you find out the Easter, it will do the very quick kind of painful ending where it's like Sayori just immediately realizes that now she's kind of inherited and she's become sentient and knows everything about how this game works. And then she just kills herself immediately.
Yes.
And it's like, whoa. That's
the end. Yeah.
That's a quick one.
It's quick. It's shocking. And if you wait 10 minutes on that end screen without clicking, without doing anything, a message appears. And since this is a spoiler cast, I'll tell you what it is. The message says, now everyone can be happy. And then, of course, it's just there, and you can click out and restart the game.
Yeah.
But so here is a question, a speculation, because we've played Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, but I thought this was an interesting question to ask. In your opinion, would it have been much more impactful to have played the original game and actually manipulate files on your own computer instead of manipulating files and not really manipulating you can only delete Monica's file, you cannot delete other characters, by the way, if you're playing Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. Which is the first thing I thought, what if we delete everybody else and just leave Monica from the very beginning? Yes. That is not possible to do in Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. You can only delete Monica. So would it have been much more impactful if you had to do all of that on your own machine instead of virtual machine that Plus gives you.
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd bring that up, because I was gonna mention it as well.
Yes.
Since we only have played the Plus version, we've never played the original, but we're aware that there is another way to play it, and the original method was there was no virtual machine, so you had your game files, and then when Monica says you gotta delete my file, or she hints at it, you go in there and you literally delete the file, which is like amazing. I think there is definitely a level of like it's just more impactful because you're doing it on your own computer.
I think
there's definitely something about that versus like, oh, it's a virtual machine. But I actually do have a thought that I just kind of popped into my head. Because it's a virtual machine and because you're more restricted, it does kind of tie into the whole lack of power and lack of control. That is one of the persistent mechanics, I suppose, or lack of mechanics.
Well, it's a theme throughout the game, right? You could say it's
exactly.
A theme.
So you could say it's a theme, where it's like it's literally removing your power, and there's something greater. So it's like who, and then that makes you ask you questions: who actually designed the virtual machine? Then who's hosting it, and how does that work?
Well, there are a number of virtual machines, judging by the emails, and in some of them, Monica gains sentience. And then she starts manipulating and creating virtual machines herself. So
there you go. So there's like deeper stuff in there. When you do that part, it becomes like a narrative element. But when you do it the old way, the original way, it has more impact in the moment. So I think it's a decision that they made where they're like, well, also because it's on console now as well, they probably couldn't do that. So it was a workaround.
Yeah,
so
that was definitely a workaround for sure.
Yeah, not necessarily like a decision they wanted to make, but they had to make it because of the constraints of the operating systems on consoles. And that, we can understand that, but there is something special about the idea of going into the files yourself on your computer. And it also perfectly ties into the way that your name displays, because they read your and how they know that you're streaming because you have OBS open, because that's what it's reading from the game. So it makes it tie in so much nicer and connect up, but I get why they had to do it the virtual machine way, and it does add something to it as well in a different way.
It does add in a different way, and actually a thought just occurred to me. Because the emails indicate that you it's not just the creators, the developers who created virtual machines and put the game on and see that Monica is starting to gain sentience, but she herself starts making these virtual machines, right? It's almost like the story tells you that all these games that are on consoles and all of the Doki Doki Literature Club Plus games were created by Monica and spread throughout the world so that people would actually interact with her and spend time with her, right?
Which is a great idea as well.
Right, yeah, right? I actually just thought of that. So that could also be like, oh, by the way, we'll just leave that little warm in your mind. But any other thoughts on manipulating of the game files? Because I honestly agree with you entirely on both points. I still think that having to do it on your own computer would have been much more impactful for me. And maybe even, try and manipulate game files and maybe delete one character and see what was the reaction, how would the game react, etc. Which I was not able to do with Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. And maybe if I am, or probably when I am replaying the game in maybe 10 years' time or so, because I would want to go back to the game once I kind of, the memory of it kind of gets a little bit fuzzy in my mind. I would most likely play it the original way and try and manipulate the games myself and see what happens. But not now, because the memory is too fresh and I think I've gotten out of the game all I can at the moment, at least.
Yes.
All right. Next topic, and we are at the last end of the stream here. Poems. Poems are a big part of the game.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, what is your favorite poem?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, as you know yourself, there's a lot of.
They're all
ones.
good.
There's a lot of. They're all good. Exactly. Yeah. It's hard to pick one, but I picked kind of two because for different reasons.
Okay.
I cheated. You could say.
Oh no! Go on.
But okay. So the first one I'll talk about is "Hole in the Wall." I have it open here, and it's Monica's poem. It's the first Monica poem, and the reason it's really cool was that the first time reading it, you don't really get what it's talking about because, you just don't understand the game. You haven't seen the story play out yet. You don't understand that Monica is controlling things and developing sentience.
Yep.
But once you read it afterwards, it's like it changes the meaning completely. And the last two lines were. Oh, the last three lines were, I realize now that I wasn't looking in, I was looking out, and he on the other side was looking in.
Yeah, that is beautiful. It's
really good.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, and all of Monica's poems are like that. So but that's because it was the first one. I think I hit the hardest. It resonated with me more when I reread it because I was like, oh yeah. Even when I read it the first time, I was like, I didn't quite understand what it meant by he on the other side was looking in, but I was already like, this has to be important. I was like, there's something about this without really like realizing it. But then one other one I just want to shout out was the Amy Likes Spiders poem by Natsuki. So.
Yes.
It's actually amazing. Yeah, the more you think about it, the more you read it, and when it comes up in the game, it's delivered alongside Yuri's poem, which is about her basically self-harming and cutting herself. Not directly, but once you realize and you've delved into her character a bit more and you've read it again, it's very overt and obvious. But then when you go to Amy Likes Spiders, you realize that she's talking about Yuri. Amy is actually Yuri, and spiders is a metaphor for her her demons and her wanting to do all this kind of stuff, for her cutting herself. And then at the end it says, "I'm going to tell everyone." And I thought that was interesting as well.
Interesting. I understood it completely differently, but go ahead, because I want to talk about this. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I think this was, it's talking about Yuri, but I actually think it's also talking about Monica, because later on, Natsuki is the one that gives you the letter and writes a letter to say Monica is controlling and directing Yuri, if you remember that one.
Yeah, I remember.
So I think this is foreshadowing for that, but that's what I got from it.
Okay.
And I really liked it. Yeah.
So it's a funny. It's not my favorite poem, but it is a funny poem. And actually, I want to give shout out to my partner here. Because she has played the game in Japanese. She's Japanese, if you're not aware. And she has played the game in Japanese, and she said that the translation, first of all, is fantastic, and the poems are amazing in Japanese as well. And more importantly, the poem that Yuri writes that is absolutely ineligible in English, it's still very crazy, but you can make sense of it in Japanese, which I thought was very, very interesting. But addressing the Amy Likes Spiders, let's talk about that for a second. I understood it completely differently. I understood that Amy is Natsuki. and spiders is manga. And everybody is speaking on her, and she is basically explaining that everybody doesn't want to be friends with her because, oh, she likes spiders, or oh, she likes manga. And I'll tell everybody she likes manga, so nobody would be friends with her or with me, right? Because she's writing from
her perspective. Yeah.
From her perspective. And that is my take on the poem. And I just thought it was interesting that you have completely different perspective, like literally mirror opposite perspective of the poem compared to me. Also, I think that the other people are both Monica and Yuri, the ones that, well, from my point of view, the ones that saying that, oh, we'll tell everyone, because neither Monica nor Yuri think that manga is actually literature. Yes. Yeah, that's my take on that.
I can see that. I can definitely see your one. I think it's it's more personal to her, and I definitely see that. Yeah.
But as for my favorite poem, I will, since you cheated, I will cheat as well. The first one I will read because it is very, very short. And it is Natsuki's poem. It's Natsuki's first poem. Eagles can fly. Monkeys can climb. Crickets can leap and horses can race. Owls can seek and cheetahs can run. Eagles can fly. People can try. But that's about it. And at first sight, it appears to be very, very simple, and they actually discuss this poem in the very, very beginning of the game. But it is about the powerlessness of the people and how they aspire to be more and try and do things, but actually they cannot do any of those things as well as any of those creatures. In this instance, we're talking about, of course, metaphorical things. Any thing can be there. But thinking about it a little bit more deeper, this poem refers to the game itself. Because you can try, but that's about it. Nothing you do actually changes. Right?
Yes.
You can try and choose a different choice, but at the end of the day, you will arrive to the same result. But then they say it's about the journey and not the destination. So I love this specific poem both for its simplicity, for its rhyming. I do like the poems that rhyme, and for a much deeper meaning than a first read might actually give you. The second poem is Yuri's first poem, and that is The Raccoon. And it's interesting that you said, oh, it gives you hints. Well, the first time I read the poem, I'm like, oh, Yuri is really... I'm actually just reading the chat now. But Yuri is really like saying that, oh, I'm a manipulative person and I'm gonna manipulate you, and then, you're gonna come back to me and eat from my lap. That's what it's all about. That was my first impression of the poem. Innisfree says, my favorite is Sayori's one about glass vials. Is that the cookie jar where you look into the head in the cookie jar?
Oh,
I think that might be the one. But for me, so the Yuri's first poem, the reason why I love it so much, it's because in that poem, she literally says she's self-harming, and this is why. And I'm going to read you the paragraph of where she actually says that. And when I was rereading it, and it finally hit me, I was like, mind blown. I was like, what the hell? Seriously? It's literally written here in plain sight, and you cannot see it.
Yeah.
So
go for it.
It starts with, I'm not going to read all of it, but the specific, let's say, paragraph. I gave the raccoon a piece of bread. My subconscious, well aware of consequences. Well aware that a raccoon that is fed will always come back for more. The enticing beauty of my cutting knife was the symptom. The bread, my hungry curiosity. The raccoon, an urge. And she's literally saying what the poem is all about. This is what it is. Read the rest of the poem. I'm self-harming.
Yeah.
And that is just fantastic. And I love this poem because of that. Not because it is more poetic or I just like the theme of it, but because it like directly ties into the character and says this is what the character is doing, but you will not see it until you actually replay the game and go through the Yuri's path, Yuri's story. Only then would you actually be able to understand what that poem really says.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, it's really good.
Innisfree says that it is the jar poem. I'm not sure if I can find that poem right now. But I do remember the poem, and I think it is very cool. And it is definitely... no, I can't find it right now. And yeah, I won't waste my time trying to find it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely it's very, very sad as well. And
if you notice,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. If you notice, Amy likes spiders. So both poems have animals.
Yeah.
So that's where I think there is definitely a connection there because they're metaphors.
Oh, absolutely.
The spider and the raccoon and they're that's what made me think, there's something there.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? But as to the Innisfree's favorite poem, it is both very sad and very tragic, and this is where Sayori really screams out for help, and maybe one of those where a lot of people might actually get that, oh, Sayori is going on through some issues here, perchance. But yeah, so what are your general thoughts on the poems? We've covered what is our favorite. Did you think before you started playing this game that having poems in the game and having to read poems in the game would be interesting and engaging and or add something to the narrative apart from padding out the experience? Very loaded question. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I was about to say that's completely loaded, but well, for one, I did not expect there to be poems whatsoever. So that was something I had no idea that was going to be in the game versus some of the other thoughts I had going on, obviously. But yeah, that's definitely one that came kind of out of nowhere for me, and I didn't expect them to be so diverse. So it was really, I think their biggest strength is that there's so many, but at the same time, each one of them evokes a certain character. Each set of poems, I should say, evokes a certain character, and they did a really good job of like honing in on their personal issues and their mental health problems. So, or in the case of Monica, it was like giving you hints as to like what was going on with her specifically, and
her literally screaming out for you to see her and asking to pay attention, and I am the only one here that's actually real. Yeah,
there was a lot of that. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I don't even know if it's a mechanic, but it kind of became one in the sense of you had to go back and read them, and then you got something else out of it. So you had to replay the poems.
you had to replay the poems, absolutely. Which actually, you were talking about, is it a mechanic? We kind of mentioned about the soundscape and the way the music plays.
We completely forgot.
And we have completely forgotten to cover that. But maybe if we touch on that very, very briefly right now, because it serves a very similar purpose as the poems in terms of it's not really a mechanic, but it is kind of almost a mechanic in terms of atmosphere builder. And the music starts very happy-go-lucky, very sort of anime-ish, pop-ish music. But how it is used in a game, how the music, either the track changes or there are some dissonance. And my partner said her favorite part was having the main theme music play, and then those dissonant notes start to creep in when the game starts going off the rails, and you're like,
the off notes.
Yeah, it's like, did it just play an off note? What the hell happened there? And that is indeed covered very, very brilliantly. Just maybe if you have any other thoughts on that, we can kind of contribute to that. But that's my thoughts as well as my partner's.
Yeah. The off notes were amazing because that happened right after Sayori's death, and then you start the game kind of fresh.
Yep.
And then you start experiencing the glitches. And I think the combination of the glitches, the visual effects,
and the music,
with the music, and the cool, I think the best part about the music is it sounded normal. And then every so often you just hear the off note.
Yeah.
You're like, am I going crazy? And I think that's the beauty of the psychological horror scape that they created in this game, where it's like you're always on your toes. You're like, what are they going to throw at me next? I don't quite know. Sometimes you have an idea, but a lot of the time you're just kind of left in this kind of this space where you're just constantly on, like, you don't want to trip on something.
Exactly.
The game is so simple in terms of its visual presentation. So I think that the music ends up like hitting almost harder because you're generally seeing the same screens over and over again. So when there's something different introduced, you're like, oh, I can see that, I can feel it.
And there is one extra thing I want to add on the same note. The lack of music.
I was literally thinking just a second.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
The way they used absence of music and to indicate weird things going on, or proverbial shit is about to hit the fan, was amazing. Because the music is just so heavy, and they're like, and
then it stops.
And they're just like, oh,
it's like
crap.
It's like musical chairs, like you have to stop, and then you got to pay attention, make sure you're not moving too much.
Yeah. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And they even did it in the side stories, which was interesting because sometimes when they're like, it was a poignant moment and they're trying to explain something or like, focus on a moment, the music stops, and they did it really well there as well.
It definitely highlights the gravity of the moment of the scene.
Yeah. Like the characters are getting closer to each other. They're sharing something really personal. So I felt that was done really well in the side stories. And obviously, in the main game it was exceptional because of like, oh my God, what's going to happen now?
Exactly.
This is so tense. Like it was, like it earns its horror badge with sequences like that,
Absolutely. But circling back to the poems, is there anything else, any other thoughts on the poems that you have?
No, overall, I love the addition of them. Didn't expect them, and I think they added a lot to the experience. And I'm sure, like, you could, without even playing the game, at some point you can kind of go back to them and have a read and enjoy them again, and remember the emotions that they evoked, as you were playing and as you were maybe rereading and trying to piece together what was happening and post first ending and all this kind of stuff.
I totally agree with you. And the poems can be poems in their own right without actually even be attached to the game and be very good. I thought that as a standalone poems, they would have been just as good as part of the game. But being part of the game elevates them again one step.
Yeah, I actually saw, like, I didn't read. There was a Reddit thread, and the guy the person was analyzing the poems outside of the context of the game, which was exactly what they were doing. They were like, if the game didn't exist, how would I interpret this poem? And I think it was just like either a school or college experiment or something, like an assignment. And I thought that was kind of cool. That they should be. That should be possible because of the nature of the medium. Like if you write a poem, it should be interpreted in many different ways, depending on who's looking at it, at what time, what context, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. How you're even feeling can affect how you interpret the poem.
Absolutely. Yeah. And kind of the game sort of teaches you almost to do that as you go through and as you experience story more and more. And come back to the poems and reread them, and you're like, oh, well, that's what the poem means, actually. Instead of, like, the first impression of the poem I got, or maybe even the second impression I got of the poem. So, yeah, I agree with you there. I think my loaded question in the beginning summarizes my thoughts on it. I was not expecting it. I did not think that the poems would add anything to the game. Or but could add anything to the game apart from maybe bulking up the gameplay loop, bulking up the sort of the length of the game. But how wrong was I? I think you put it really well that the poems add so much and they can be analyzed without the game, they can be analyzed with the game, and they add to the game a huge amount and can almost be considered a mechanic in their own right.
Totally.
Right. On that note, final thoughts. So I know that we have shed viewers, we have gained viewers, we have shed viewers again. So if there are any viewers right now that would like to ask us any questions, do that in the chat. We would be more than happy to answer them. But while we wait for that, I have one question for you. Would you play another visual novel horror game right now after have completed Doki Doki Literature Club?
Yeah, it's a. I think this is a complex one for me, at least, because as I said early on, I don't play a lot of these types of games, and I definitely don't play dating simulator games. They're just not my genre generally. But saying that, this kind of opens up the possibility of there's other games. There's 1 in 1,000 of them that might actually be really special. Yeah. And if those exist, and I'm sure they do, I wouldn't be against giving them a go. I have a feeling that Doki Doki is very different and very unique in its genre and what it's trying to do. And I think that's why it stood the test of time, and that's why there's a new released version of it. And it has a long-standing fan base for many, many reasons, just because of like how you can analyze it, how you can look at it from all these different perspectives, as we've discussed. Yeah. And it was saying that I don't know if I will right now, but if someone said, okay, this is kind of like Doki Doki and it's a visual novel style game, and it's really, really special and it's great, I think you should give it a go if you like Doki Doki. I wouldn't be against the thought of that. So that's kind of my perspective on it. I'm not in a rush to play the next Doki Doki copy.
Doki Doki clone.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm open to the idea of there being something else that's different enough and yet evokes maybe some emotion. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the same emotion, doesn't have to be a horror game necessarily, but something different from the status quo, I would say.
No, I agree with you there. Again, funnily enough, funny how that works. For me, I definitely will not be playing a horror visual novel game right now. I have tried something similar, even though it's not a visual novel horror game. It's Undertale. It's something that has been recommended after I have completed Doki Doki, and I have tried to play it, and full disclosure, I am not having the best of times with it. I'm not particularly enjoying it. I know it has an ardent following, but I think it does a lot of things that Doki Doki did. It tries to do a lot of things that Doki Doki did but not so well as Doki Doki did it. And I don't want to kind of almost pollute the essence and memory I have and the enjoyment I had with Doki Doki by playing something similar but not quite. Now, there is another game that has been recommended to me by Yuri. Yuri in chat. I'm pretty sure that they have left by now because they said they're gonna watch the whole chat, the whole Game Talk Meow podcast on YouTube. And they said that if you enjoyed Doki Doki, you should play it. It's very much like it, and it in both the visual novel, the horror, and themes. So do it. And I will be doing it, but maybe in a couple of years' time. Not now, because right now I feel like anything else would just not compare and sour my thoughts on Doki Doki, because I really have it on a huge pedestal. So yes. That's my thoughts on would I play another visual novel horror game. Right, well, since there were no questions from the audience, I think we might as well wrap up. So, any closing thoughts? Any final thoughts on Doki Doki Literature Club? And anything else? And Dew on the Grass just says, Bottles was an absolutely incredible poem. And hello. And I totally agree with you as well there, Dew. But yes, we're wrapping up. So,
final thoughts.
Take it away.
Yes.
Any final closing thoughts?
I loved it. I think it was an amazing experience, an amazing game. I would recommend it to everybody. Obviously, if you're watching this, you've already played it, so I don't have to tell you to play it.
Yeah, this is more for people who played it and want to hear what other people think and maybe dissect a little bit more than from your own experience.
But yeah, I think it's not perfect by any means. Just like anything is not perfect, but I think after the chat, there's definitely criticisms we both had.
Yes.
But that's not to say that it's an incredible game and a must play in my book. So I would give it a huge double thumbs up from me.
Likewise, I would give it huge double thumbs up. It's not perfect, but as far as the visual novels go, I think it was sublime experience. It is the best visual novel I've played, and I haven't played a lot. I've played a few. And it will always hold a very special place in my heart. And I will definitely be coming back to it, as I said, in about 10, maybe even 15 years' time, if I'm still alive. But it is one of those things that, because of the strength of the narrative and themes, that would still be very relevant in 10 and 15 years' time. And the visuals are so simple that it should age like a fine wine, as they say. So that's my thoughts. If you haven't played it, what the hell are you doing listening to this? Seriously, guys, you've just spoiled the whole game for yourself. Get out of here.